All right, folks. Well, welcome to the stream. I'm not sure if the viewer count on YouTube's very accurate. I think it's slow to update, so we'll see. Might be a pretty small group. People might join later. See how it turns out. Yo, McNuggets. What's up, dude? Let me just double check all the audio's good here. Nice, yeah. All right. Oh, you made a map just last night, eh? Nice. Have you been modding for very long? I'm not sure I've seen too many of your maps yet. But no, basically, so I've got a bit of an outline for what I'm going over today. It's not like a full script. And the topics that we'll be covering, we're kind of starting with the Unity basics, right? So someone who hasn't used Unity before can kind of get up to speed on those. And then I'm going to cover everything you need to make, test, and publish a map, like just the bare bones stuff. And then some of the decorative stuff as well, right? So like getting the lighting to look all right, fog, and some audio stuff like music and ambience as well. So basically just enough that if you've never made a mod before, you should hopefully walk away today with a working map. Let me just get a couple things set up here. And then I know I posted about this in a few places, but this is assuming that you followed my last video tutorial for setting up the Marrow SDK. Just because I didn't want to have to wait for folks to download everything and troubleshoot that live. Wanted that to be pretty consistent. You've been modding the game since you were 11 to 12. I mean, I don't know how long that is, but that's pretty impressive, dude. That's like the sort of thing that you do as a kid and then you grow up to be like a game dev or something. Yes. Now it'd be awesome to see you make maps, B-boy. Okay, let's see if this transition works here. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, basically for anybody following along, you'll want to open up your Marrow SDK project from the last tutorial. And just to reiterate from that last tutorial, this project can be used for all of your mods. So you don't have to make the project again if you make another mod. You just organize it as separate files inside. I'm just going to give folks a little bit of time to open theirs if they haven't already. In the meanwhile, let's cover some of what's going on here, because if you've never used Unity before, this can actually be quite a lot to look at, right? But it's actually quite simple. Starting off, we've got this little project tab in the bottom, or the console tab. I think project is the one that's open by default though. This is basically just like your Windows File Explorer, but for your project. So when you create your project and you choose like where it'll be, these are all the files inside of that. And you've got kind of two main sections. You've got packages, which really you don't tend to touch, with one exception, which is the Marrow Backlot Assets. And we'll go over that towards the end of the stream here today. But mainly everything is in assets here. So for instance, if you make a level, it'll be in here. If you add models, textures, everything's going to be organized inside of this assets area. And you can right click and you can make, let me see here. It is a lot to look at. Oh yeah, there it is. You can right click and you can create your own folders on the fly, or let me just get File Explorer open here. I'll show you a good little example here. So if I just drag that up here, you'll see I've located my Marrow SDK project in File Explorer, and you'll see we have the same assets and packages files here. So if you were doing something like, let's say you're like 3D modeling and you want to export it, you can just export it using regular Windows directories, create folders, whatever, and you'll actually see it. Here, I'll demonstrate. You'll see it update live in Unity. So if I made a folder called test, you'd immediately see it in here. And sometimes there'd be a bit of a loading screen just as it prepares the assets. But that's also important to understand, because anything that you do to these files, you can't just like delete something and then undo the deletion. Like, you actually are deleting the file off your computer. So, excuse me. So you do want to be aware of that. Then next to project, we have the console here. This is just where you see any errors related to what you're working on. So for instance, here we've got a few categories. You can click on them to turn them on and off. So like here, these white ones, it's like, these are kind of just messages. Then you have warnings, and then you have actual like serious errors. Hopefully you won't have to use this too much, but there will be some situations where it is helpful, because it will tell you exactly what's wrong sometimes. But for the most part, if there's an issue with your mod, you're going to find that out in-game. So we'll cover some proper steps to try and make that easier, help you debug stuff. But that's for later on. This is a pretty simple tutorial. Next, here in the middle, we've got your kind of game-like view, right? This is your scene view. You can right-click to look around. And while you're right-clicking, you can actually use W, A, S, and D to fly around. And then you've got your little settings here. Now, if you've ever used any sort of 3D design software, doesn't deletion go to the recycle bin? You know, it might go to the recycle bin, but I'd caution to say that it does. I'm pretty sure there's a few things you can do in Unity that would permanently wreck your stuff if you weren't careful. It's like Minimator. I have used that. That was pretty dope as a kid using that. I assume they still update it. But yeah, you've basically got your panning tool here on the left. You've got tools for moving objects around. So like, we click on this little sun here, drag it around, different axes. So it's like your 3D modeling tool basics, right? You want to rotate, you look at the little rotation tool. And one handy thing that you can do here is all of these tools are organized on your keyboard as well. Exactly like Blender, yeah. So for instance, if you press Q, it'll do the first one, W, it'll do the next one, E, so on. And that speeds up the process quite a bit. But again, like, you know, if you've used 3D software, this is all pretty standard stuff. You've got your own little different perspectives you can click on here. Same deal. Now this scene view is previewing what's in this little tab here, the hierarchy, right? So if you're making a level, you're going to have your level in this hierarchy. In this case, this little sample scene thing here, you could think of this as a level. We're going to make an actual one soon, but just for demonstration, right? You have sample scene, and then it's showing within sample scene we have a little camera and a light. So if this was a level, you could have like, you know, it'd be like your level name and then your objects within it. You can even like create an empty object and have it like contain other ones, rename it. It's all organization, right? But it's also how Unity functions. Everything is inside this hierarchy and everything is an object. And now this goes one layer deeper, right? Basically everything at its root is one of these empty objects, right? Just a point in space. It's got a position, it can be rotated, it can be scaled. It's got a name, right? But any other thing that you see here in this hierarchy, it is an empty object, but it's got these extra properties to them called components. So like if you have a light, for instance, this has the light component, and that has all your settings for it. If you have a camera, it has the camera component, so on. So if you're ever trying to edit something, you're just looking for the object that has those components, or you're taking an object. Let's go find where this game object is for the example. You can actually press F to find something. We'll jump right to it. And I'll use the move tool just so I can see. Oh yeah, it has a 3D position, right? So I can see where it is. If I wanted this empty object to do something, I can just add the component for it. So just as a little example, and we will get to level creation very soon here. Just as a little example, I could add like a box collider. Bam. Now it's not just a position in space, now it actually has extra properties. So that's kind of the basics for how all of this Unity stuff works, right? You have your game files in the bottom. Then you add them to the hierarchy. And when they're in the hierarchy, they appear in the scene view. There's also a game view where you can like press play and test stuff out. But because this is a SDK, it's not actually, you know, the script for the game. You won't be able to test your mod using the play button. You can test some physics things, like you can test things that come with Unity but are not part of the SDK, but you can't test SDK related stuff. All of the SDK scripts are what you'd call dummy scripts, right? They just tell the game, oh yeah, use this script that's already part of the game. It's not the actual code runnable in Unity. You can kind of imagine why that's the case, right? So you can't just create a Bonelab clone using stolen code because you got the SDK. It's just instructions for the game. And let me just take a peek at my notes here real quick. Okay, so we've got the basic terminology. Oh yes. There's also a thing called prefabs, which I'll go over a little bit later. But basically, any object that you create, you can actually drag to your files. And it will make a copy of it called a prefab. And you can drag these into your scene whenever you want. And it will have all of the same properties of the original. And you can even go as far as to select the original and open it. And if I make an edit here, let's for instance say I make it so this isn't a cube. I make it so it's like a weird rectangular prism here. Actually, a cube might be a rectangular prism, but you get the idea. I've made an adjustment to it. Now when I go back to the scene, the others are adjusted as well. So you can see how this would actually save you a lot of time. Anytime you can make something a prefab and reuse it, you really should be doing that. But we're kind of getting into the weeds of the terminology and the layout here. I should probably get into the actual level creation. So, when you first made your Marrow project, you probably saw, where is it here? The Getting Started window under the Stress Level 0 tab. This opened by default the first time we made this, right? And so in that tutorial, we went over like making sure the Bonelab install is located, a couple other things. And we briefly looked at the asset warehouse, this window, which you can also open up here in the top left. Now, this asset warehouse is essentially a sort of mod manager, right? You can kind of think of the way that it displays Bonelab, for instance, here as a mod. You've got the game, and then you've got all these different assets from the game, like guns, magazines, that sort of thing. And these are split into two different things. You have pallets, these blue things, and then you have crates. And a pallet is essentially a mod that you would install. So let's say you get like the Drax pack, for instance. You're installing the Drax pack pallet, and that pallet is full of crates. So for instance, a spawnable is a type of crate, a level is a type of crate. So if you got like the Drax pack and you wanted a certain AK from it, there would be a AK whatever crate inside of it. So what we're going to do for this tutorial is we're going to click the little create palette button in the top left here. I'll have to give it a little name. I'm going to just call it tutorial mod. I think, yeah, you can do spaces as well. Give it an author. And create. And you'll notice when you make a palette, it's not asking you what type of mod you're creating, because it can contain any type of mod within it. Except code mods, of course. These are all just SDK mods. And now that we have the palette, you can click on it inside the asset warehouse, and you see some details here appear on the right in the inspector. I did forget to point out this is called the inspector. Anytime you select something in the hierarchy, file browser, wherever, this is where you'll see the properties for it. So for instance, here we can give the mod a description. I think the description is visible in game somewhere. I'm not 100% sure on that. version, you can just use that for organization. Do I think that once patch 7.8.9 comes out and Bonelab moves to Marrow 2, that making mods will be easier? I think that it will make mods easier if you're trying to make more complex mods. And the reason I say that is there's the extended SDK, which you may have heard of, which is essentially Bonelab modders have added in all of the dummy scripts that are not supported yet so that you can make more complex mods. But because they're not supported yet, they're subject to change and they don't really have great documentation or tutorials. They're not all very easy to use. So it will make mods easier to make, I assume, especially if you're trying to make more complex ones. But the very basics, I imagine, will be more or less the same. I do hope they make the workflow for actually getting into it a little bit easier, though. Yeah, it definitely has gotten easier each update. Now, right here, what we want to do, right, is we've got the new crate button. I don't know if it's collapsed by default or not, but you click on it, and you see we can make a level or an avatar. Now, we'll get into the extended SDK later, but the extended SDK allows you to add spawnables as well. We just want to make a new level. Let's click on that. And similar to creating a new palette, right? Our level create has a title. I'll just call it Tutorial World. And a scene. So custom scene is like, if you've made a level before, you can choose the scene file for it. So if you were trying to like make a mod using an existing level you've made, you can select it here. I recommend you use the default Marrow scene because it sets some things up for you that will save you some time. And then you'll see it's also giving us a barcode. And the barcode is just the author name, the palette name, and then it says level, and then the name of the level. And this is kind of how Bonelab organizes what mods you're using, right? So for somebody else to have a mod that overwrites yours, they would have to give the exact same author name, same palette name, same crate name. So this is kind of the unique ID for your mod. You won't really have to mess around with this. I just wanted to explain that while it's here. Let's press create. And you'll see it'll want to save the scene that I'm currently in. That's fine. Just because it is going to close it to open up the new one. Now we can get this asset warehouse out of our way. We can get getting started out of the way. If we take a little look around, you'll see it's very different now. We've actually got a sky. We've got this here, which if you click on it, you'll see it's the player marker. This is essentially the spawn point, right? If you spawn into your world, it will be exactly where this is. And I believe this is the Ford model, roughly. So you can get an idea of scale as well. If you were playing as Ford, you will be exactly this big. There's a couple other things going on here. We've got a directional light. We've got a zone. We've got a volume. This is stuff that we'll look into a little bit later, but we will look into this today. We'll just leave them as is for now. And you'll also see they've got a floor here. And kind of like I was demonstrating earlier, right? The floor is just an empty game object, but with stuff added on. So we've got the collider, which I added in that example. You can even turn it on and off if you want. And then we've got these two new things here. The mesh filter component and the mesh renderer component. And especially the renderer looks very complex, but don't worry, you really will not be interacting with almost any of this. At most times you will just be interacting with the materials dropdown. And in this case, it's just got a default material on it. And again, we'll get back to this. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. The mesh filter also just is what mesh you have, what model you have. So for instance, there's a default Unity cube model. And to make it so that this isn't a cube, they just scaled it. They just stretched it. And then down here we have a impact properties script. And we'll get into that later, but this is essentially if you shoot an object in Bonelab, impact properties decides what happens to it. So for instance, well, they have impact properties, but they didn't even set it to anything, which is odd. But they basically have a whole list of things, you know, if you shoot it, does blood come out? If you shoot it, do little pieces of cardboard fly around? Does dirt get kicked up? We'll take a little look at that later. But that's sort of what's going on here, right? The ground is just an empty object with stuff. The spawn point's just an empty object with another component, etc. Everything. Let me look at my notes here real quick. Okay. Right. So, there's something important that we want to go over, right? Because this is in Unity and it's a game engine, you have things that have physics enabled and you have things that just stay in place, right? You refer to those as static objects. Obviously, you don't want the floor to be moving around, so you want the floor to be static. So they have this little checkbox here. Now, making an object static is doing multiple things at once. And we'll get into this later, but they've got this whole checklist of things. When they're all checked, it's basically saying, okay, this object's not going to move. If you generate lighting for the scene, this object will be part of that light. If you make a Navmesh, right? If you make instructions for where AI can walk, this is a walkable surface. It's basically telling the game all that. So anytime that you are playing a map that you've made and something maybe doesn't seem like it's properly integrated into the environment, it probably needs to be static, and it's not. So the floor is static. I think static is the default. Let's actually see. If I make an object, okay, it's not. So this is what you have to watch out for. If you make a new object, it's not going to be static by default, so it's not going to interact with all of these different systems by default. And you'll see some better examples of that later. But in addition to that, if you wanted something to have real physics, like if you wanted something to be able to fall, roll around, be pushed around, there is a component for that. And we'll get into that in future tutorials. We're not really going to look into that in this one. But just so you know, if you drag a cube in, it's not going to move just by itself. Okay. And then next up here, let's see. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention too, in Bonelab specifically, if an object is static and it has a collider, it's going to let you grab the top of that object to help you climb and whatnot. So that's just a nice little thing that they do. You don't have to manually set it to be grabbable. If it's static, it's grabbable, but only on the top. Okay. And while we're here looking at the floor, I want to go over what different collider components there are and what you need to know about them. And for that, let's add a little bit more of a complex shape. I'm just going to go to this Game Object tab and add a new 3D object. Basically, all of these objects here are just empty objects with components added for you. So for instance, if I add let's do a capsule. If I add a capsule, it's going to add an object. It's going to name it capsule for me by default. It's going to give it a mesh. It's going to give it a default material. And it's going to give it a collider here. Now, something that's very important to understand with the colliders. You have two types of colliders, basically. You have what you would call primitive colliders. For instance, capsule collider, box collider. Let's just move that off to the side. And let's move the capsule off to the side as well. And then you have another type, mesh colliders. You'll notice we don't really get a preview for the mesh collider right now. And that's because it is exactly the same as the mesh. In fact, if we go up here to the draw mode and we choose shaded wireframe, we can see how detailed this capsule mesh is, right? These are all the little triangles that it's made out of. This mesh collider adds a little triangle collider to every single one. Whereas these primitive colliders, I think the capsule is mainly based on like radiuses, radii. So it's easier to compute than, say, all these little triangles. Another thing to keep in mind is these primitives are full. You can't clip through these. it's actually got a full colliding volume. Whereas what happens with these mesh colliders by default, we'll go over these settings in a sec, is it is making paper thin triangular colliders on them. So if you were to throw a small object like a magazine at this hard enough, and the frame rate is low enough, which this can happen at high frame rates, this can happen at 90 FPS. One frame of your magazine is up here, another frame is down here. It never got a chance to collide because it's so thin. So these mesh colliders, as they come by default, are a really poor option for most maps. And there's some situations where you need them. If this was a crazy complex shape, maybe you just do put a mesh collider on. But you're going to have those problems, right? I'm Greased Scotsman's son. I mean, hey, that's how I started learning bonework stuff too. Now, with these mesh colliders, there's this convex mode, right? Check that on. You'll see now we're getting a preview, but it's not exactly the same as the geometry. Let's turn off the shaded wireframe, set it back to shaded. You'll see it's less complex. Now, basically what convex does is it shrink wraps the collider around the object. So this actually is a fully solid collider now. It's got collision in the middle, it's got collision on the edge, it's not paper thin anymore. But that's at a cost. If you had a hole punched through the middle of this model, convex mode will not allow you to pass through the hole. It's just shrink wrapping over the outside. Same with, like, let's say, imagine this is like a tree trunk, right? And part of it had a branch sticking out off to the side. You wouldn't have a trunk and then a branch. Convex would drape the collision over, so there would be this triangular area in between where there actually is added collision. So convex is nice because it's more reliable and more performant than without it on, which you'd call concave, right? Which is easy to remember. If you have a cave, it's going to have collision. It's going to do collision on the inside and out. But convex is very reliable. Ideally, right? Especially in this situation, you just use your capsule because it's the same shape, or you'd use multiple primitives and you'd kind of make the shape of the thing. Another example, right, is let's remove all these colliders. And let's add, I'm going to select this capsule and I'm going to say to duplicate. And then I'm just going to make it follow the original around by dragging it inside of it. So you see you've got the original, and then below it, or as a child of it, is another one. I'm going to make this a more complex shape. Okay. And then you'll see if I grab the original, it moves with it. That's the nice thing with the hierarchy. Can you make a Chinese airport in the Marrow SDK? Dude, what? I might be biased, but that's immediately making me wonder if you're referencing a tragedy or something I don't want to ask. It's bad that that's the first thing I think of. But basically, if you're making something complex, you're not going to be able to drape a convex mesh collider over it. And a concave mesh collider is too complex, right? Maybe you don't want it to be paper thin, maybe you want it to run faster. What I like to do is I make another empty, just call it colliders. And in that, you just make empties for each collider. So let's say we had like a capsule. Bam. New capsule collider. You'll actually see it looks like a sphere by default because it's not high enough to have that definition. So now let's even rename this parent capsule just for the sake of demonstration. So we've got our parent capsule. It's got another capsule inside of it. The original one has a mesh. And then I've added this colliders object, right? So now I have a capsule collider that I can move around. I can position it. I can line it up. I can duplicate it again, or you can do Control D to duplicate it quickly. I can add another collider, line it up. Try and get it to match, right? So now I have colliders I can move separately from the meshes. In this example, this is overkill because obviously these shapes are exactly what the colliders are. But if this was something more complex, you might be able to do this and recreate the collision out of capsules, boxes, etc. And you will have way better performance, and you will have more accurate collision than if you did convex meshes, and you won't have paper thin collision like if you did a concave mesh. And one last little thing I forgot to mention, if you do use a mesh collider, which you probably will at some point, there is cooking options. Make sure this is set to everything. If it's not set to everything, which thankfully it looks like it's the default here, if it's not set to everything, Quest players will phase right through it in some situations, which I found out the hard way. And then secondly, in all of your colliders, you'll have a physics material. The SDK comes with a whole bunch here. You can kind of click on them to see the full name here. This is how much friction and how bouncy the material is. So like if you made something and you wanted it to be bouncy as rubber, well, they've got an option for that. They have one called high friction. I think they've got a zero friction, ice, whatever you need. Can't you just size the small capsules collider like normally? Oh, like, you mean, here, wait. You mean like I could just add a capsule collider to it, right? Like if you were doing just the capsule, then yeah, you would do it this way. What am I making right now? Well, right now I'm kind of showing the Unity basics, and then we're going to go over everything you need to make a simple map, and then test it locally and publish it to the workshop today. So if you know nothing about modding and you've already set up like a SDK project from my previous video, you'll be able to leave today, hopefully, fingers crossed, with a working map. Using Unity's scaler. Yes. Okay. So that's a great question, Volta. So Unity lets you scale an object, right? So like if we select our collider, you can still scale it using Unity's scalars. The only reason why I'd recommend you use radius and height when you can is because in future tutorials, we'll be using grips. And grips assume that everything is scaled 1:1:1. So if you can adjust radius and height instead, it will avoid you from confusing the grip scripts. But for anything else, yeah, you can just scale it using Unity's scalar. In fact, if you go up here, you can switch between global and local. Local being it's rotated with the object. Global being everything is oriented with the world. Oh, you love the pool rooms map? That's great to hear, dude. Thank you. I'm glad people enjoy that map so much, even if it doesn't perform the best at times. Okay. Next up here, let's see. So we've gone over collision. The only other thing I haven't covered is triggers. Basically, if you check this box, we will make it so that this collider does not stop anything. It doesn't physically collide with anything, but it will take note of what passes through it. And so we'll use that for like spawnables and special events and maps and whatnot in the future. Okay, we've gone over meshes. Ah, yes, materials. I might have to copy some files from another project to demonstrate this. So, every mesh has its filter telling it what shape it is, right? What model it's using. And then it's got its mesh renderer, which is telling it what material it's using. So for instance, this floor here is using the lit material, which is just a default material. If I click on it and I press delete, it's going to have no material. You see right through it. Let's undo that. Now you can click on it and it will actually show you, and this applies to basically everything. If you click on a selected resource, it'll open it up in the project files for you. You can click on it again to inspect it. So we can see all of the different little settings that this default lit material has. We can see that it has a color, this gray color that's part of it, and a bunch of other stuff we'll get into in a sec here. Now you can actually make your own materials, which is kind of important, right? If you're making a map of your own, you want to add like grass, you want to add bricks, whatever. Let's go back to assets and project. And let's start creating some folders here to organize things. I'm going to make one called tutorial resources. Excuse my typing. Just called it tutorial. And let's add a materials folder in there. And just getting kind of ahead of things, let's also add a models folder. And let's even add a sound effects folder. Now in my other projects, I would usually create a folder like this and I'd call it something like shared assets or common assets, right? The things that you're very likely to reuse in other mods. After you finish streaming, can I DM you something me and my friend made in the Extend SK? Yeah, of course, dude. You might have to send me a friend request first, though. I'm not sure. Now, go into the materials folder. We can right click, and you can do this anywhere. I'm just trying to keep things organized. You can right click and you can say create. And somewhere in here, there we go, material. Let's name it, I'm just going to call it example material for now, example mat, keep it short. Now, you'll see this looks very much like that default material that we were looking at earlier. It's got a color, it's got some room for other textures, which we'll cover in a sec. Whole bunch of settings, and this looks like a lot. This can be this can be a bit intimidating at first if you don't know what any of this does. Don't worry, you're only going to interact with like a little bit of this at a time. Now, just to see as we edit this, I'm going to take this material, I'm going to drag it onto our floor so that we can see changes in real time. Alternatively, you can click on the floor and you can drag it to the material slot, or you can even click this little circle and you can search for any material that you've made. So we could say, type example in the search bar, it's going to find example material. There's a few ways that you can apply it, right? Let's edit the material again. So as our example, I can make it red. You're going to see it change in real time. But where this really gets powerful is you can start to add the textures. And oh, perfectly timed question. Do you have to make all textures yourself, or is there a way to get Bonelab textures and use them? Okay. If you wanted to get textures straight from Bonelab, you'd probably have to rip the game. And if I'm being honest, I've tried following a tutorial for that before, and I messed it up, so I'm probably not going to make a ripping tutorial. It's pretty complex. Hopefully, I don't know, people have had good luck with some of the tutorials online, but I think I screwed up following it. But I'm going to show you a few good places to get textures. Yeah, Atlas. I think Atlas has the best and most up-to-date one. Now, there is a couple of materials that you get if you set up the project with the Marrow Backlot Assets, like in the previous video. There are some extra materials, and this is the one counterintuitive place that you will find files in your project. If you go to packages, you'll see there's these two blue folders. One of these is called Backlot, Marrow Backlot. And if we go to grid, materials, we have grid colors and grid glowing, basically concrete squares that are painted different colors and little neon lights. And these are kind of materials that are Bonelab-esque. Now, because this is a stretched out cube, it's just going to look like a big square. I think with the exception of one of these, let's see, is it this one? Yes. One of these is what you'd call a triplanar material, which means it exists in the world space instead of stretching across the object. So every single meter is going to make a new square with this triplanar one. And if you really wanted, you could even right click and, I was going to say duplicate, but it's File Explorer. You just copy paste. Or maybe, I think because it's in packages, you can't. You'd have to copy it out of packages. But you can make your own copy of it and you can change the texture. Let's see. So see how they call this like proto, gray, L gray, whatever. We could search proto and get like proto white. Then we can change the base color. Let's make it red. Now we have a triplanar grid that's red. So there's a lot you can do if you want just the grid textures. But you're probably going to want more complex textures than just that, right? Yo, sup, frog guy? Let's quickly... Wait. Tutorial. Okay, there it is. I looked right over it. Let's quickly drag my material back on. And I'm going to show you a great place to get some textures. Can I check the message you sent? I'll check that in a bit, all right? Now, let me just open up a website that you are going to love. Check this out, right? Ambient CG. Over 2,000 textures, and you do not have to give credit. You do not have to pay. Check this out. Go to all assets. You can search, you can sort by type and category. For this tutorial, let's say you want ground. Bam. Look at all these beautiful ground textures. Also, almost every single texture you find on here, it will have normal maps, right? So like bumpiness, it will have smoothness map, it will have metallic maps, and it will tile seamlessly. You might have some repeating patterns on some depending on how big you tile it. We'll see. Let's just find kind of like this one. It's like dirt with leaves or something. Now they'll have a little preview image. You can even go to a tiling preview. You can see what it looks like if they're all next to each other. You can zoom in and out. They've got a little 3D preview. So you can see like all the little details. Realistically, you're probably not going to use displacement. It's kind of overkill. So you can just scale that down to see how it probably will look in your map. But as you can see, we have a perfectly flat plane, but because it has the normal textures and smoothness and everything, it looks very realistic. Now, they have all sorts of sizes for these textures. You really are never going to need the bigger sizes. Like, being honest with you, get 1K and get JPEG because it's more compressed. So you're going to have half the file size and it's going to perform better in game. And you're only really going to notice, like for instance with this, you know, if your face is right up against it, you can start to see the pixels. I think this preview here is using the 8K one. You can imagine if it's just 1/8 the resolution, this is still going to look great at like this distance. And this close, it's going to be lower quality, but that's going to be like the amount of quality you'd expect. Okay. Let's get the 1K JPEG version. Drag this down for now. And just make sure there's nothing doxing me in my downloads. Okay, yeah, just installers. So, you get your zip file, right? Let's cut that. And then, actually even better, check this out. Materials, right? We've got our materials folder. Let's make a textures folder. Just drag it in there. Actually, I don't know if you can unzip it from in Unity. So you can also say show and explore if you need to. Now it doesn't really matter what tool you use to unzip. I use WinRAR. Just say extract files. And it's going to create a folder that's the name of your zip with all of the files inside. Just give that a second here. And you'll see now it says importing. That's just Unity organizing all the files. We can get rid of the zip now that it's open. And then what I like to do here too is I like to keep the names clean. So I'll remove all the extra stuff. I'll just keep the name and the number. And that helps me search for things later on. So now we have a folder for the textures for ground 078. And there's a couple extra things in here we don't need. We don't need the preview thumbnail. Okay. We don't need the blend file, like the 3D model file that they use for the preview. What else? These first three, the MTLX, TRES, and USDC, I don't actually know what these are. You don't need them. Okay. And then we've got a few different ones here. Let me zoom in a little bit. So you have ambient occlusion. This is basically shading for your texture. So it'll make it seem like light is casting shadows in the dark areas. Like if you had bricks, for instance, you would have ambient occlusion making the lines between the bricks shaded. You have the color, obviously. Displacement is the one I was showing earlier that adds physical bumpiness. You really don't need this, especially in VR game. Like, it's going to take up performance, and it's going to be a feature not all shaders have, or not all materials are going to support. I usually just get rid of that. I'm sure you could use it. Then you have two normal maps. This is basically how bumpy the material is, and it kind of fakes it by changing how the light interacts instead of physically making it bumpier. I'm pretty sure DirectX or DX is the version that is the format Unity uses. I really hope I'm right about that, but I delete the GL one. And then lastly, roughness. And we'll go over this a little bit later, but Unity uses smoothness instead of roughness, so we'll have to invert this once we do use it. For this example though, I'm just going to use the color one. So I'm going to click on my material. So I'm editing it. I'm going to click on this little lock in the top right so that if I click on stuff, this is still open. It lets me edit it. And then I can go textures and I can just drag that color into the base map. And bam, you've got your ground texture. Now you'll see it's stretched just like I was showing with the original grid textures, right? And that's what tiling is for. So, for instance, this texture, usually ambient CG textures look best if they're tiled 1 meter at a time, which is 1 unit in Unity. For example, if we click on the ground, this is scaled 10 by 10. So we know this is 10 meters wide, 10 meters long. So if we edit our material, we should probably tile it. That actually is overkill. Let's try something like 5 by 5. And even then, it looks a little stretched in one direction. I think this is one of the rare ones that's rectangular texture and not a square. We can just edit 1. And that's starting to look a lot more natural. Now you can also do math inside any of these boxes in Unity. So for instance, let's see. This is very obviously repeating, right? Maybe we want it like 1.5 times the size. We can literally say 5 times 1.5 and press enter. 7 times 1.5, press enter. Well, actually, I probably should have divided. Let's just divide it by 2. And you'll see the results immediately. Not a tip, but if you're using an SLZ grass material, you can set the shader to triplanar. Yeah, for sure. I'll show you the shader here in a bit too, for anyone wondering. So essentially, every material is using a shader. This lit MAS standard is just the default when you're using the Marrow SDK, and the shader gives you all these settings. You can click on that and you can change it. So for instance, we can see what other SLZ shaders there are. And lit MAS just means it's a shader that interacts with the lighting, and it uses an MAS map, or a metallic ambient occlusion smoothness map, which I'll show in, I'll go over that in a little bit here too. Let's see what other MAS ones they have here. You'll see they have a triplanar option. So I could actually say litmus triplanar. And now I don't have to tile it so much because it's tiling automatically. In fact, if I move the ground, you'll see it's not moving it with the ground. It's entirely based on its position in the world. So that's kind of your quick shortcut, especially if you're scaling Unity objects. You're going to want it to be triplanar. If you're applying it to like 3D modeled stuff, that's not so much of a concern, because the model will actually have UV mapping showing where all the textures are going. Now likewise, right, you've got your normal map. So we could say, look for ground, select the purple one, and it's going to tell you, oh, this is not marked as a normal map. You can just click fix. It automatically detects that for you. And you can specifically change the size in triplanar. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Now we're getting to the MAS map. All right. So if you want it to look like it did in Ambient CG, where it's got the shininess, it's got any metallicness, like let's say there's a rock, maybe it would look a little metallic, you're going to need an MAS map. Now, if you just need it to be flat, there are a ton of single pixel MAS maps here that SLZ has put in the SDK, and you'll see the change as you click on them here. Some are smoother, some are more metallic, some are smooth and metallic, but they're not tailored to your texture. So how do we get an MAS map for our ground texture? Well, you'd have to use image editing software, and unfortunately I did not set this up for this video because I'm not planning to go into this too in depth, but there is a community creation that you can get that lets you drop these maps and it will make an MAS map for you. I'm going to go over this a bit more in a future tutorial, but let me open GIMP real quick. Just any image editing software, GIMP, Photoshop, you name it. And I'll just show you an example just so you understand what these maps actually are doing. So now that it's open, I'm going to grab roughness and ambient occlusion, and if there was metallic, I'd get that too. Open. And then, like I said earlier, Unity does not use roughness, Unity uses smoothness. So if you were doing anything with these roughness maps, you first would have to invert the colors. And I'm going to do a whole workshop based on texturing and stuff later. So if this feels like I'm getting ahead of myself, I really am. But basically, if you created a new image that was the exact same size as this one, and you made it into 3 layers, you don't need to fill it with transparency. Again, I'm doing extra right now. So you just remember MAS, metallic, ambient, smoothness. So in the first layer, you'd get your metallic map. Because I don't have one, I'll make it black. It's not metallic. The value is 0. Then you have ambient occlusion. This one here, you'll see it's basically shading around the features. So it makes it look like if you cast light on it, there's still shadows around the rock. I would go to my A, my ambient occlusion, my second layer, and paste that. And then S for smoothness, which again is just roughness but inverted. I just slap that in there, and now you have your 3 layers, and because they are all black and white, they can represent different colors in one image. I believe you go to Components, Compose. So I can now take these 3 layers and I can make them represent red, green, and blue, or MAS. This would be an MAS map. And I'll cover this in a future video, but there is a community plugin that does this for you in Unity. So you don't have to do all this. I just forgot to set it up ahead of time. So I wanted to give you a demonstration. But if I exported this, let's go to my Unity project. Assets. We'll just put it with all the other ones, all the other textures for the ground. And instead of whatever color, normal roughness, I'll just call it MAS. Export it, and you will immediately see it in Unity. So what we can do now, right, is we can go to that material, which I did forget to mention. The material also appears at the bottom of the object when you're inspecting it, so you can edit it right here. Now, in our MAS section, let's just lock it so it stays open. We can get our MAS texture that we just made, and you'll immediately see it's looking a lot more realistic. It's got that kind of proper depth that you'd expect. Let's actually, I'll give you a better example. You can see I switch between none. Actually, I don't know why default none looks so bad. Or a texture that's not correct. And then MAS. Okay, that was not as good as an example as I thought it would be, but you get the point. We've properly given it instructions for how it should look. But we had to build it out of these textures. Let me actually just open Discord in the background here. I'm going to find this plugin and I'm going to show you what it is, because you're probably going to want to do this when you're making your map, so I want to make it easy for you. Let's see. No, it's somewhere in mod resources on the Bonelab Discord. I just have to find it. I think it's called Channel Packer. Okay. Okay, this is not even the one I was looking for, but it looks like this does the same thing. So, if you hop onto the Unity Asset Store, you could get this. You could get Texture Channel Mixer for free. You just log in, add it to your assets, and then all you would have to do is go open up the Package Manager window. And then under Packages, you can actually see the assets that you've added from the store, assuming you're logged in. And you could click on it in the list and you could click to download and install it. And then I believe, yeah, it would give you a new window under the Windows dropdown, and you just drag your textures in. You could have it combine them all. So that's something worth looking into. I'll maybe demonstrate that in a future video just because I don't have it set up right now. Okay. Let's see. We've kind of hovered on materials for a while here, so I kind of want to wrap that up. There's one thing I do want to cover here, which is when you're making your materials, you want to keep in mind the limitations of the Quest headsets, right? Especially the Quest 2. Because transparency, let's actually, can I demonstrate that? You'll see you have a surface type, opaque, transparent, and fade. I've honestly never used fade, so I can't give you advice on that, but opaque means it's not transparent at all. then transparent. Because our texture does not have transparency, I'm just going to adjust the color to make it more transparent. See, I've got this kind of ghost-like effect going on. If you have multiple layers of transparent object, like if I duplicate this, you can see them through each other. This is a situation that is going to perform very poorly, especially on the Quest 2. On PC, not so much. So just bear in mind, if you do use transparency, keep it to a minimum and try to have it be situations where they're not layered in front of each other, at least not often. And alternatively, and this still has a performance impact on Quest, but you can, and this might not actually be a setting with this shader. Let me see if there's another one. You can do what they call alpha clipping, which is where transparent sections in the texture are just cut off. There's no blending. And that can be much more performant. I don't think there's an alpha clip shader by default, but you can get a ton of lit MAS style shaders in mod resources in the Bonelab community Discord, so definitely take a peek at that. As well as some incredible water by Atlas. Let's see here. That should be it for materials. Oh, and very lastly for materials, emission. Emission is just how much something glows. And if it's static, right? If you have the static check and it's emitting, it will actually contribute to baked lighting, which we'll do a little later here. So you can actually, make a light bulb, make it emit light, and bake it in that way. You don't have to add like a sun, for instance, or a point light. There's kind of ways around that. Okay. In my notes here, I have lighting next. Let me quickly go over the skybox while we're here, though. Just because that's a short one. Okay. So we've got our inspector window on the right here, but there's actually other windows we can add that affect the environment. So I'm going to go Window. I'm going to go, oh, where would that be? General, I think. If I seem lost here, it's because I have everything set up in my previous projects for ages. So when I have to look for something, I really have to look. I probably should have gone over some of this at a time. I swear. Oh, yeah. I was looking for one called Environment, but it's actually called Lighting because it has an Environment tab. And then I just like to drag it next to Inspector, so you can either inspect or you can edit lighting for your whole scene. So basically, there's a whole bunch of settings here. Real-time lighting, ignore that. Mixed lighting, ignore that. Lightmap Settings we'll cover in a bit. But for now, I want to go to the Environment tab because this is where you can set what your skybox is. And you'll see skyboxes are a material just like how the ground is a material. Let's click on it. And you'll see we have a little skybox that the Marrow SDK generated for us when we made our world. So we can edit the skybox and it will only edit it for this world. It won't edit for every other world that has a skybox. Let's choose the inspector and click on this skybox real quick. And you'll see I actually have it locked still from editing the ground. Let's just unlock that. So you'll see the skybox is just a material and it's using a skybox shader instead of just a basic lit MAS shader. In this case, it's a procedural skybox. So let's see where the sun is. There it is. Okay. You'll see they actually put little sliders in here for like sun size, how it looks on the edges, how thick the atmosphere is. All these little sliders, and this is how it's going to look in game as well. But the cool thing is you can change. Let's see. I think they have another skybox under the SLZ shaders here. Cube map. So if you ever go onto the asset store and you get Skybox cube map, you can add it to this shader. And I actually had a couple examples. Let me see if I can pull them up real quick here. Because there is a very good little pack of Skyboxes you can get for free. Oh, I didn't realize there's a demo for this one. Okay, even better, even better. 1 second here. Oh, this is good. Okay. If you want Skyboxes, my dude, all sky. Get all sky free. Let's see how many Skyboxes it has. 10 skies. This guy's Skyboxes are incredibly high quality, and they have every variation you want. If you get the free one and you like them, check out the paid one, the paid all sky one. There are more Skyboxes than you will ever use, and they are all high quality. So if you want a place to start, if you want a custom sky other than the procedural one, you could go that route, or you can go find any free cube map online, and you can drag it into that shader. And I think specifically the cube map is a file you can create here somewhere. Let me show you just so you're not lost if you do it. Where might actually be off screen. No. Material. I swear I must be looking right over it. It might actually just be a texture type. But wants a cube map. Oh, let's look at default sky. Here's an example. The material. Oh, there we go. Oh, okay, yeah. So if you had a cube map texture, when you add it to your project, you would click on it and you would change the texture shape to cube. That's all you'd have to do. I forgot that. I thought it was a custom asset you had to add, but no. And this is just the default Unity sky here, I think. If you wanted something that looks fairly nice. This already looks nice. Or it says default, but it's under SLZ, so maybe they did make this one. Or at least add this one. They had the license for it. I don't know. Okay. But part of the reason this is important, right? If you have a skybox and you add fog to your map, which we'll do in a little bit here, you can actually make the fog mimic the skybox and it will make it look very natural. Okay. What is my next topic here? Ah, yes, lighting. You got all sky Dago. Nice. Yeah, no, it really is good. I think every single map that I've published that ever has a sky in it is using all sky, which is not a lot, come to think of it, but I've got a lot in the works, so I guess I forget that some of them are not released yet. Just slowly chipping away. So lighting. This is a big thing, right? A lot of maps, especially for first-time map creator, you're probably just going to end up using this light that came with your scene, this directional light, because that's, I mean, it's just right there, right? It's the easy option. You'll see we rotate it, and it's not casting a shadow away from the light source, it's actually making a sun that is virtually infinitely far away and casting shadows from that sun. So it's very easy to compute. However, this is what you would refer to as a real-time light right now, which means when you're playing the game and you're walking around, it's going to make a new shadow every single frame to take into account stuff that's moving around. So it's going to be very accurate with the shadows. The lighting's not going to bounce around at all. And the performance cost of making the shadows can get quite high, especially if you have multiple real-time lights. There's actually a hard limit for the number of real-time lights in-game at one time. So you really want to only have one, maybe two in your scene active at a time, because otherwise someone might do something like spawn in a flashlight, which also has a real-time light, and things just kind of stop working. Now, we can change this if we want. We can select the sun. And again, we're looking at it in the inspector, right? And we can see, well, actually it's giving us real-time shadows, but it's set to baked right now. But if it's real-time, this is how it's going to look. There's going to be shadows. If we want, what we can do is we can say, well, this is a baked light. We can choose the type of shadow. Most of this actually you don't have to worry about. You can change the color. You can change, I think ultraviolet's just how bright it is. Maybe that's, I don't know, you'd have to fiddle around with that. Usually I'm just changing color and intensity, right? And when you have a baked light and you have static objects, for the sake of this example, let's select my group of shapes here. We'll make it static. And because it's asking, I'm going to make all children, so everything inside of it static as well. So that way all of the models will interact with the lighting. All you got to do is have a baked light, have some static stuff, and then click lighting. And you will see there's a generate lighting button here. And this is basically just going to go look at your light map settings in the scene, which by default, pretty good. These will work in a lot of situations, especially for basic math. However, I would like to mention, if your light maps are very high fidelity, if they're high resolution, you can end up with stuttering on Quest because it will run out of video memory because the textures are that big. So if you make a very large area, take this light map resolution and lower that down. So for instance, see how this is resolution 16 pixels per unit. That basically means for every meter, so roughly, well, there's actually a grid, so we can see for every meter, this is a square meter here, there's going to be 16 samples within that cubic area for the light map. I think that's roughly what it is. So you could imagine if you have a very large terrain, you don't need 16 samples, you need like 8, maybe 5. Let's keep it at 16 for now though, because this is a small scene. We can make it look nice. We can even turn it up if we want. And likewise, if you wanted the lighting to bounce around more and be more accurate, you have more indirect samples. These samples here are just how long it's going to take to bake. It's going to have a more complex calculation. These settings here are going to affect the actual file size from the texture, like the actual light map texture size and quality. You know, you could even just turn the max light map size down here, for instance. Another thing, ambient occlusion. This is a kind of redundant feature in my opinion. So ambient occlusion is when two objects are close to each other and it adds shading between them that tapers off. If you're doing a lot of samples already and your resolution's high enough, the lighting bouncing around is going to generate ambient occlusion by itself. That's just going to be a byproduct. It's going to happen to look that way, right? That's just how lighting works. So this ambient occlusion that it generates separately is it's usually overkill. I think I'm surprised there isn't a slider for the I assume it's just the contribution. If you do use it, I'd lower the contribution, but really you don't need it. For this example, let's turn it on and just see how it looks. All these other settings, you really don't have to worry about this. The light mapper, I think the idea with the GPU versus CPU one is the GPU one is maybe a little rougher around the edges, but it generates faster. I'm just going to do CPU, and it's still going to be fast enough. This is a simple scene. So that's enough talk. Let's actually click generate. And you'll see there's a little progress bar in the bottom here. There we go. And there, it took a little bit to update. This is how you know it's just about done. Everything's kind of reloading. You'll see for baked lighting, our sun is probably way too bright, right? For real-time lighting, it doesn't have to be, it can be more intense. You'll also see there's some artifacts, some inconsistencies on the capsule. This is something that you'll notice with some very advanced shapes when you're baking lighting. Part of this is kind of Unity's fault with the way that they laid out the UVs on these. But basically you'll see, this is what I was talking about. If you keep the ambient occlusion on, you kind of naturally got it, but then you have this extra one added on and it adds this kind of unnatural black look. So if we turned that off, and then we went to our sun, and we adjusted the intensity, like let's say maybe this is twice as intense as we want, let's do half. We can just do another quick bake. And I also recommend you don't check auto generate, otherwise it's going to do this a lot of the times when you make adjustments to your scene. Yo, Monorig, what's up? If anyone here has tuned in late and you were hoping to follow along, don't worry, the stream replay will be available afterwards, and then I'm going to make an edited down version as well after that. Okay. Now you'll see the ambient occlusion is not nearly as bad. You'll also notice we've got warm lighting from the sun and we've got cool shadows. And you can actually control under environment what these shadows look like under the real-time shadow color. So if you wanted this to be warm shadows, use a warmer color. If you want it to be pitch black where there's no sunlight, make it pitch black. If you want it to be fully lit, you can make it white, although this would probably burn your eyes out of their sockets, it'd be so bright. I really like doing it black and then just having more samples for realistic scenes. My pool rooms map actually did this. When there's no lighting, it is pitch black, but I had the light come from the windows and bounce around and light the entire scene that way so that it looked realistic. It looked more like what you would expect to see in a real environment. Now, in addition to the baked lighting, especially in an outdoor scene, you might still want to have a real-time light, right? You might want to have baked lighting making things look nice, especially indoors and away from the sun. But then you might still want the player's shadow cast. In that case, I think you just click mixed. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what mixed does. Usually I just do one or the other, but a lot of people do like to have that player shadow in their scene. I think that's what you do. Instead of just real-time or baked, you can do both at the same time. I prefer baked. Let me take a little peek at my notes here. Okay. Oh yes. So, and just in case it wasn't clear, the baked lighting does not change. So for instance, if this was a physical object, we would not want it to be static, because as soon as it moves, that shadow is going to stay there, and the shadows on this object are going to stay there. So when it rotates, you can imagine it starts to look pretty ugly. So just keep that in mind. Your baked lighting is only for static objects, and it's not updating mid-game. So what if you did have a dynamic object and you wanted it to at least roughly look like the lighting should? Let me just make a little example here so that this works as best as it can. I'm going to make a big wall to block the sun. Okay. And I'm going to adjust the sun too so the wall can block it easier. Real big. Make it so there's just a nice big dark area on the other side. And we have to, again, static. We want it to affect the light bake. Now, when we bake the lighting, we're going to have this shaded side and we're going to have this bright side. Let's add another object, and we'll just add a sphere, and this is going to be our representation of like an item or a player, anything that's going to move around in the scene. So, right, what we'd expect, right, is if this is a dark area and this is a bright area, we want this object to be dark here and bright here. And there's actually a system for that called light probes. Now, they put a little light probe group in the scene automatically when you make a Marrow SDK level using their template. I just want to edit these probes. I want to show you how they work, because this kind of 3D grid is actually kind of overkill. I'm going to take a perspective where I can see all of these. I'm going to click Edit Probes, and I'm going to select all of these and delete them. And I'm going to show you one probe at a time how you probably want to lay these out and what they do. So I'm going to add a probe. And you see it gives me this little blue ball. And to make things even easier, by the way, you can click on one of these directional arrows to get a perspective, and then you can click on the middle for it to be flat. Now you'll notice sometimes things clip out of existence because the camera's actually closer than it appears. You can hold right click and use WASD to move around even when it's flat. So what I do is I like to zoom in, and if it's getting cut off like this, I would just hold right click and S to back the camera up until you can see. So now we have a nice 2D preview, basically. It makes things easier. So we've got our probe, and these probes, if we add another one, let's duplicate. These probes draw lines between each other. They make a web. So if the sphere is near this probe, it's going to mimic the color of lighting that this probe sampled. So if it's bright here, the probe's going to say, hey, it's bright. And the light's coming from this direction. So the sphere is going to be like, oh, okay, I'll look that way. And then if we put one in the dark area, as the sphere approaches the dark one, it's going to be like, oh, no, actually become darker. It's going to transition smoothly. So what you want to do is you want to have your probes where the lighting changes, right? You don't really need, let's say, more at the corners is appropriate. And then if this whole area is just going to be fully lit by the sun, we don't need to add extra probes because the closest probe is going to be these ones here. So if your sphere is here, it's going to be like, okay, closest one, oh, you're fully lit. So you don't need to have them floating around in space. You just need them to define, oh, it's dark here and it's bright here, and then it will use the closest one. If we switch perspective, we can easily grab these, duplicate them, drag them, and now you have a nice little 3D square, right? So whatever side of this square you're on, it's going to mimic the lighting from that side. And just to make it even better, it might gradient a bit. The light might seep over, so let's do that. And just to make sure that if the sphere is here, it's not closest to this, I'll add another one here, so it's still getting a nice sample. It's being told that it's bright. Let's make it 3D again. Okay, so we've got the probes in place. Now what happens is when you generate lighting, it will bake all the lighting, and then it will test each probe as well for you automatically. I think, yeah, if you use the drop down, you can just bake reflection probes. Let's do both. Let's just click generate. Give it a sec here. And you may have noticed the progress bar is kind of deceptive, like all the time here. Like it appears and disappears. It'll be stuck at the start and then jump right to the end. It's not the most reliable. Okay. Oh, sup AF Studios? I'm not too sure why it generated the light at an angle, or I wasn't, but I think I realized, okay, this is why the light was too bright. I forgot to mention environment lighting. We have the skybox as a source here. I'm going to say color, black. The only source of light in this scene will now be this sun. Yeah, have a good one, Volta. Thanks for dropping in. Let's generate it again here, now that I've fixed those settings. And it'll probably be a little too dark because I did have to turn the intensity down on the light. There we go. But for this example, oops. For this example, this is perfect, right? We've got pitch black on one side, and we've got lit on the other. And we've got our sphere. And because our sphere is not static, well, you'll see under probes, it's going to use light probes. It's going to blend between them. So, sphere is bright. Move it over. Sphere is dark. And if we go in the middle, we can see the transition between the two probes. What's this level going to be about? Well, this level is just me building it as an example while I teach the Marrow SDK tools and how to make a functioning level. So really, this is going to be probably a bit of a mess. I probably won't publish it, but we'll see. It might transform into something really nice. Okay. I think I turned it into 2D mode. Oh yeah, if you press 2, it switches to 2D view. So if you ever do that by mistake, that's the key you probably pressed. Okay. I think that's it for lighting. Let me just double check here. Oh yeah. Okay. One more thing. Reflections, right? As an example, let's take this sphere and let's make a new material. And I'm going to make something that's nice and reflective. Close all this. So I'm going to go back to my materials folder here, and I'm going to make a new one. Let's call it shiny. And in this one, let's drag it to the sphere. This one will select one of the MAS textures that comes with the SDK. And basically, if it's bluer, it's shinier. If it's redder, it's more metallic. So we'll take one that's really blue. Or we could even go full metallic like this, right? This is actually going to be great. Fully metallic, fully smooth. Now you might be wondering, how is it reflecting the environment right now when it's not on the screen? It's not using the screen space reflections. Well, it's actually stealing the reflection from this thing that came with the scene. Actually, I didn't even click on the right one. This thing. Reflection probe. Let's move it. What this is a 360-degree camera that, when you bake lighting, takes a single snapshot and saves it as a cube map, like a skybox. In very low res, like you can tell that this is crusty, but that's fine. And what this does is objects in the scene, for instance, our very reflective ball here, when they are within the bounds, within this square that the reflection probe has, it will ask the reflection probe, well, what's your picture? What's it look like around here? And it will copy the reflection. If we move it outside, let me see real quick. Okay, I think it's copying the reflection probe still, just because it's the closest thing. I'm going to make 2 to give you a better example, because this is difficult to explain otherwise. So let's make one probe where if you're on this side of the wall, your reflections are going to look like this perspective, right? That's fine. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to say if you're on this side of the wall, it will have perspective from here. So on one side, you'll see the reflection of all these objects. On the other side, you'll see the wall in the sky. And we don't need to rebake the lighting for this. We can just click bake on each probe. You'll see the image update down here. So like this is what the reflections will look like here. You've got the black wall. Now, I can demonstrate. When our sphere is here, you know, it has a roughly proper reflection. When it moves here, there will be a point in between the two where it fades into the other reflection probe. It's actually really dark. That might not be correct. It's within the probe. Background. What if I change the background color? Is there an issue with the background? It's supposed to imitate the skybox. I'm not sure why it's... Oh! Okay, it would reflect the environment, but the light probe is telling it it's pitch black, so realistically it's not going to reflect anything. If I turn the lighting off from the top, now it looks as proper. You get the reflection of the black wall, and on the other side, you get the reflection of the bright wall. So if you combine these tools, right, if you do baked lighting, if you have a real-time shadow, if you have reflection probes and lighting probes, you will have a very realistic lighting setup for your scene, and it's all going to perform really well. So these are some really great ways to improve how your scene looks and feels playing it, and without it being too complex, right? And so, for instance, all of this whole setup is going to run perfectly fine on Quest. It's nothing too fancy, but it looks good. And again, right, you can see the pixelation on the shadows here. You can do a few things about that. Like you can go lighting, scene. You could increase the light map resolution. You could change the max light map size. You could make it so it's compressed more or less. I think sometimes you actually do have issues from compression, and sometimes no compression is crazy better than even high quality compression, so just bear that in mind. Or, check this out, go to baked light maps and you'll see your file that is the baked light map. Let me actually open that up. I'll show you exactly what's going on here. The baked light map is just every surface in your scene. So for instance, these are all the sides of the capsule. You have, I assume this is all the sides of the floor, all the sides of the wall. And it's just drawing them onto a texture, right? But you can see, well, obviously it's pixelated here. So in game or in Unity, either one, it's going to be pixelated too. And it's made a 512 by 512 resolution light map. Now that's nowhere near the max light map size we have set. So just based on that, we know, oh, well, if we increase the light map resolution, it has plenty of room to fit inside this. Let's say 32. Double it, right? We generate this again, it's going to have twice the resolution. But again, if you have a massive space, that whole surface needs to have the light map painted over it. So you do have to be careful. If you have a very large map, it's going to perform poorly on Quest if your light map is also very high resolution. But I want to show you one more trick just once this is done. There you go. Double the resolution. It could probably be a lot better. But it's also baked lighting with a very harsh shadow. Most of the time, it's not going to look this bad. This is just a very direct example. What you can also do, if your file size gets way too big and you don't want to just keep rebaking and tweaking settings, you can click on your texture. And this only works if you don't bake it again, so just bear in mind, this is kind of a hacky solution. Click on your texture and you just go, oh, max size. Let's make that tiny. Press apply. Direct effect. So one of the solutions here, right, is let's say you pack your map for PC. Oh, keep the size high, pack it. Oh, but it's running poor on Quest. Lower it temporarily and then pack it for Quest. Switch it back after. That's kind of one of the hacky solutions there, is you can just change the stuff on the fly and it doesn't degrade the original file. It just filters it so that the final project that you make is using the low quality version. So overall, hopefully that's enough info on lighting to really get you ahead designing stuff for Quest or PC or whatever. This is basically the stuff that you don't get an explanation for in most tutorials. Am I going to eventually show how to import/rip the Bonelab assets, materials, or props? Atlas has a tutorial for that. That's pretty good. Personally, that stuff's over my head. I've tried following his tutorial and I kind of failed at it, not gonna lie. But I've seen other people who they've never ripped a game before and they've followed his tutorial and it's worked out fine, so I recommend it. Yeah. Let's see what I've got next here. Oh, okay. This is where things get pretty cool. Is the fog, okay? And this is also where people run into issues and it can be very difficult to troubleshoot. So hopefully I'm going to be able to give you a good idea of what's going on when you try to make fog and you run into an issue here. Okay, so let's start with the most basic fog that is not baked. Let's remove this baked volumetric area for now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make one from scratch instead of using the example one just to show you the process. I'm going to make something, I'm going to call it, let's call it global fog. And global fog consists of a volume. And volume is just an area that the player can be within and it will visually affect something. So by itself, it's not really doing anything. Once we add a volume profile, we just click new, and I think it will name it based on the name of our object too, so bear that in mind. Click new. Gives us this option to add overrides. Overrides are basically things that you see when you're inside the volume. Let's add one. And before I show you the fog, let's just do something really quick. Color adjustment. So, when you are within a volume, oh yes, our volume will also need a collider. Let's set it to local, which means you have to be within the collider to see it. Make the collider big enough that we can fly the camera into it easily. And then because this collider is used to activate the volume, it doesn't have to be physical. So we'd say is trigger, yes. Now, when I am inside of the volume, and make sure post-processing is on, that's these two little things here. When I'm inside the volume, these overrides will take effect. So if I shift the color filter to red, you now get a red environment inside. And fog relies on this same system. So let's remove color adjustments and add atmospherics, volumetrics. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to first show you how to make a nice fog that covers your entire map. Because most of the time that's all you need is maybe you want stuff in the distance to look more like the sky. Or maybe you have a very gloomy map, you want it to be foggier closer up. For that we do global, which basically means anywhere you are in the level, you will see this fog. And you'll see it pops up this little tip. You don't need a collider if it's global, disable it, remove it. If I click fix, it will automatically just disable it. We don't need it, let's get it out of here. We've got a global fog in the scene. And we've got a few settings. Weight is just blending it. So 0, you'll have no effect. 1, it will look as it's supposed to. Priority is in case you have overlapping local volumes. So something with higher priority will be the one you see. Lower priority, you'll have to leave the higher priority one to see it. Now let's look at the volumetrics here. You might notice I've made this global, so we should see it, right? Anywhere. But we're not seeing anything yet. And this is the first important thing. You need to add a camera. Let's go down here, camera. Now, something you really need to understand, if this camera is active, when you pack your map, you will be looking out of the camera. You will not be looking out of your player's eyes or head. So I like to always say camera, disable. And I'll turn that off later when I pack it. I try to remember anyways. So we just have the camera somewhere in the scene. we just leave it there. We don't even have it selected, just leave it. Now, when we work on the fog, the camera will enable us to be able to see it. We also have to go to this little drop down here and say show volumetric, enable it. It's just preparing it here. Now you'll immediately notice it's a little foggy in the distance, and we can see the difference if we toggle post-processing. Well, actually, that includes the skybox. So let's toggle the checkbox. Foggy, not foggy. Now you've probably noticed, okay, well, we've got fog, but it's not the color of our sky. Like, we have this bright scene, but the fog is gray. That's like really unnatural, right? We go over to our fog. There's a few things you can do. One is you can change the albedo or color. You can have red fog. But you'll see one limitation with this. Our fog seems quite dark, even though it's set to be as bright as possible. So what would you possibly do in that situation? Well, the fog is actually borrowing from the lighting tab in environment. You'll see we have environment reflections. The source is the skybox, so it's supposed to be imitating it, but it's too dark. There's an intensity multiplier, but it's stuck at 1. So you end up with this kind of weird situation where it's too dark. What you can do is you can say custom, and then what I like to do is I get a reflection probe. Oops, that's the sphere. It just looks like a probe when I select it. Okay, I get a reflection probe. I put it up high above the map, and I bake it. So you'll see I've got this nice view of the sky from this probe. Now here's where things are interesting, right? When I bake it, it's actually making a file. It's making a cube map file. So under the lighting tab, when it wants a cube map, I can go, oh, I got you. I think it will have probe in the name. Yeah. See, I've got this probe that's above the map somewhere. Well, when I select it, for some reason that's like actually sampling the skybox correctly, and it's the correct brightness. So the fog looks more realistic. And to really show you, because I know this is probably going to be killed by compression, it's going to look very similar. Let's make the fog closer. So all you have to do is say fog distance. That basically means, okay, well, we can see clearly for, I'd assume 50 means 50 meters. It seems like it's more than that. We drag that down, you know, now the fog is like right in your face, but you can see it's being lit by the sun. So it's borrowing the colors of the skybox. This looks amazing if you have a sunset skybox. Like, it will actually look like there's like evening or morning fog lit by the sun in one direction and then a different ambient sky color in another direction. It looks great. I recommend you keep this high though. If this is low, you're going to end up with a situation where it just kind of feels like your lenses in VR are foggy, or it feels like you're in a very humid environment. So keep this high when you can. However, this is where things are nice. Okay, get this. Base height and max height. I'll make it less, I'll make it foggier for an example. Right now it's really foggy, right? But it has a max height of 50. So if we go up 50, it's nice and clear around us. And then we descend into the fog. Well, this isn't just the fog blending. It physically exists within this range. So we can say, let's make it start a little bit under the map. Let's start like 5 meters under the map. But let's make it only go 3 meters high. So right now it's barely noticeable, but then let's make it super thick. Well, now let's actually make a big object so you can see the difference. Well, now you have fog that stuff sinks into, and you can descend into the fog and you can rise up above the fog. It still has like a view distance. If you go high enough up, you see right through it, but that's just a limitation, right? That's just, you'd have to have a pretty crazy big map. So you can do that. If you want to have a lot of fog in your map, you can tweak those values until it seems natural, like it's actually resting on the ground. And then you don't end up with that kind of foggy display feel where the fog is just all encompassing. It's all around you. So it seems like your lenses are dirty or something. This way it actually looks more like it's part of the environment. Let's see, what other notes do I have here? Okay, well, there's a lot we can do with fog. So let's say we want the fog to be different in different areas of the map. We'll keep this global fog, and it's going to have a priority. Let's give it priority of like 1. And then let's duplicate it. Let's call this local fog. And I'm going to put the 1 after in parentheses. And what that does is when I duplicate it in Unity, it will automatically change the number. So it keeps things organized. I'm going to make this a local volume. It's going to say, hey, you need your collider. Click fix, add box. Just be aware it forgets to make it a trigger, so you'll have physical fog if you don't check that. And let's make the box bigger. So one side of the floor will have this one. Let's actually get rid of the duplicate until I make some more changes. We have a local fog volume, and we'll give it a priority of 2. So we'll see global fog until we are inside the local volume, and then we'll see whatever fog profile it has. Right now it's using global fog, so let's make a new one. Add an override. Again, volumetrics. Now here, we can change some things. We could say, oh, well, if you're within this local volume, the view distance is actually 50. The fog will be far away. And maybe the fog will be red. I don't know. When you fly in, bam, changes occur. You'll see it does blend between the two. So if you have a crazy change like this, you're going to end up with some weird results. If the color's the same, it's not that noticeable. And then you can take the blend distance, let's say 5 meters. Now this is the distance outside of your high priority fog volume that will blend. So starting at 5 meters from this one, it will blend the values between the two. But because it's blending from like a fog view distance of 1 to 50, it's still quite sharp. Let's make it blend from like, select the global one. Let's make it so it's not too thick, right? And you end up with this smooth transition. Even more so, like you probably want this to be above 10 if you were doing like something this noticeable like outside. Like now you have it smoothly blended. Let's just set it to 0 though, make it snap. Now what you can start to do, right, is you can make another local fog volume. Let's have it overlap with this one for an example. Give it its own profile. And this one, let's say this one makes the fog view distance super close and it makes it like black, makes it dark, or even better, the light multiplier. This will actually make it a dark version of whatever its source is. So like in this case, its source was that reflection probe. We can make it so it's the reflection probe, but it's half as bright. And then we can say, okay, well, priority, this is priority 3. So if you're inside both, you're going to see this one. Once you leave, you can see this one. And when you're in neither, you'll see the global one. So let's see our difference, right? We've got fairly close fog, very clear, very close, and darker. Back to global. Now, another thing to bear in mind here is if you select your camera that is allowing the fog to be previewed and move it, well, maybe they changed it. Last time I did this, it previewed it from the camera's perspective and not from where your camera actually is. That might actually just be an issue with baked fog, which is what we'll be doing next here. But just bear that in mind. If you have the camera selected, it might look different. although it seems to not be the case there. Okay, double check my notes here before I go to baked fog. Oh yeah, and if you end up with black fog, again, which I've seen a few people end up with that, it's just because you need to give it a reflection source. And I really recommend doing the cube map method and a reflection probe because it lets you do so much more. For instance, if you select your reflection probe, like my one in the sky here, I can even say that it has 4 times the intensity, bake it, and then any fog that's relying on this will now be 4 times as bright. So it really gives you a lot of options there. You'll also see, because I made this massive object and then I baked this reflection probe, you get the object in the fog because it's using the probe. So that's one reason why you might want to stick with using the skybox. Which actually, I'll get rid of the probe. If you do use the skybox as a source and it's too dark, what you probably want to do is you want to go to the fog volume, global fog here, and change the light multiplier. Even then, it doesn't seem to be, I don't know, there's something about it sampling the skybox that just does not work all the time. And I think it might depend on, like, under environment, what type of skybox material or shader or whatever you're using. I'm not sure, but the custom method and using like a reflection probe texture just seems to work so much better. I like that a lot. Now, let's get rid of some of this local fog here. And let's look at baked fog volume. Okay. So, baked volumes actually interact with baked light. So if you have like a shaft of light shining into a room, that light will hit the fog and it will scatter and you'll end up with like God rays, for instance. Or like, you know, a street light illuminating the fog around it. So there's a lot that you can do with that. And it also allows you to have fog that's just in one area. It's not all around you like these non-baked fog volumes are. So to get started, you want to create another empty object. Let's call this baked fog 1. We want to give it a baked volumetric area. And you'll see it kind of just freaked out. It kind of made the screen gray. That's just a bug with this. If you toggle volumetrics, it fixes it. You'll see this is our kind of default area size. Now, similar to the lighting, to baking lighting, we have texel density, right? How often is it sampling a cubic meter to figure out what the fog should look like? 5 seems great for this. We have the size of the box. We have the baked texture, which is once the fog is baked, it'll make a 3D texture to represent. We don't really have to touch this. And then we have the texel density. So for instance, here it's saying vertically there will be fewer texels. Horizontally there will be more. So this density of 5 is not even across the whole thing. And this kind of makes sense because if you're walking side to side, you want those samples to be more realistic. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. Let me actually just show you a better example. Okay. Basically, the normalized density just means, like, if it was, let's say this is our baked volumetric area, right? We're looking at it from the side. If it was just like, you know, 1, 1, 1 across the board, if it was like even, that just means that you have these even grid of dots. But because it's fewer up and down on Y, right? Y is up and down. That means that you have your nice row of dots, and then you've got a bigger gap for the next row. So that's just a little cheat there to make it take up less data, make it bake faster. there's some situations where you maybe don't need it to be distributed evenly. I don't really mess around with that very much. Like, this setting looks good. The default is good. And then the actual density to, like, if the density is low, it's going to be thinner fog. If it's high, it's going to be thicker. One thing to bear in mind, though, if you make this fog, well, actually, I should mention this fog is also borrowing from whatever profile is active at the moment. So if you're in our global volume, it's going to borrow some things from this, like the fog view distance. It's going to maybe borrow the height, I think, the light multiplier, all this stuff. So let's actually adjust this a bit. Am I previewing it at the moment? That's a little weird. I would expect to be seeing the global fog at the moment. But I think the fact that this baked volume is here and it's not been baked yet is confusing it. If we disable that, does it? There we go. Yeah, just because we have a baked volume that has not actually been baked yet, so it's confusing it. So right now, I've got this super thick fog active, right? What I can do is this baked volumetric area will be imitating this fog volume when it's active. That's why when I activate it, you don't see anything, because now it's saying, oh, well, this baked volume has to be active for it to be visible. I think. Okay, I'll be honest, I wrote my notes poorly for this bit, but we'll get through it. And then in post, I'll edit it to be a little more understandable. So basically, once you've got your settings done for your baked volumetric area, there's a couple things you want to do. So one is make sure that you have a volume that will be active so that the player can see the baked area. You need at least one volume active. Since we have a global volume, we're good, right? You can always see the global volume. If this was a local volume, if this was one you had to be inside of, again, make sure your box is a trigger. Bear in mind, even though the baked volumetric area is like this big cube, you would have to be inside the trigger to then be able to see it. This is a common mistake that I see with the fog. Make sure anywhere you want the fog visible, you have either a global fog volume or a local one with a collider that the player will be inside of. I'm going to keep it global. You need to have a profile active for the fog to be visible. I think that's it for the notes. We can go and we can bake this area now. So we go to stress level 0, volumetric baking. Oh yes. one last thing. You'll see restart editor in DirectX 12 is an option here. Unity can use DirectX 11 or 12. Just the baking requires 12, and there's actually a setting for this. I think it's preferences and not project settings. It's not Mero SDK. It would be, maybe it was project settings actually. Let's open that up. I swear it was player. Yes. Graphics APIs under the player project settings. You'll see it just has Direct 3D 11 right now. We can add 12. And here's a little hack I found. Now, this was an issue I had in older versions of the SDK, so maybe it's fixed, but it prefers to use the one at the top. And I used to drag 12 to the top. It would restart Unity, and then it would be back at the bottom. And I'd be like, what the hell? Leave it at the bottom, just add it to the list. Then go to baking. Don't even click restart editor. This you can really leave as is. You can see we can have this skybox contribute to our fog. You just have to select what skybox you're using. Bait. Okay, maybe you do click restart. You're spreading misinformation. All right, give that a minute. But no, some of these things like fog, it's like, I don't know. I learn something new every time I do it. It's just I've done it enough now that I feel confident showing people how. You'll also notice this. Sometimes your skybox looks wonky. It's just because post-processing was not on when you loaded the level in. And then sometimes, I think the DirectX 12 messes with it somehow. But we'll leave it as is here. Bake the fog and then switch it back, right? You'll see it doesn't have the switch button anymore. You can just click, let's put the sky in. Just click bake. Now, if you click bake and it finishes instantly, it doesn't even take 2 seconds, it takes 0 seconds, and you get any issues, that is because your baked volume is too dense. It has too much detail for the size that it occupies. So in that case, you just have to make your volume occupy less space and make multiple, or it has to be less dense and occupy the same amount of space, and that will fix those crashes. It's just because the workload is too great. It caps out at a certain point. So now this is all baked. We can switch back under Project Settings, Player, switch back to 11. Actually, it is in 11. See, I don't even know why it does this. It's like, okay, well, 12's gone already. It's not intuitive. Let's enable preview and see. Let's see if I can fix what happened to the skybox. There was some trick to this. I really think it was just you restart Unity to fix the skybox. Let's see. I just add 12 again. Okay, it will just ask to restart anyway. So we've baked it. I'm going to restart Unity again. And I think that should solve the problem. Again, you can imagine why people get stuck when they're baking fog, because this is like not very fun user experience. Okay, the sky is back. You can rejoice. And again, turn on post-processing. Show volumetric, turn that on. You can see we have our global fog. And then in addition, we have a baked area that instead of taking up where the global fog takes up, it takes up its boundary. In this case, it's incredibly dense because our baked fog is dense. So just as an example, if our global fog had a higher view distance, our baked fog will also have a higher view distance. They're linked, right? Crank it up, it goes up higher. Now there's some obvious limitations to this. Let's say you want red fog. You have to have the active fog profile be red as well. So this means if you want your fog to be colored, you can only have one color at a time. Except there is one other thing you can do here. It's fog, right? It reacts to light. Let's make the sun darker. 0.2. It's going to be really dark. Let's add a light. Let's add a point. Put it on like the corner. Make it baked. And we'll make this a red light. Now it's giving us a real-time preview. Once we bake it, that's going to go away. This is just helpful for us to see what the radius is like. Give it nice intensity. Range. That seems to be fine. Let's make another one. on another corner. Let's make it blue. And for the range, okay, intensity really higher up. I'm trying to give a bunch of different light sources that will affect our fog. Let's do one with low range but really high intensity. Like that. Now we can bake our lighting, bake our fog, and we will see that the fog is actually going to interact with this lighting. Let's double check again. These are all baked lights. Generate lighting. And if you had multiple colored lights in the scene instead of just like sky lighting, this is where you'd want to put a lighting probe at the source and around the edges of the radius so that the lighting can blend for your dynamic object. So just like how we put light probes near the walls before, you would put them near light sources and near the edge of the effect. This shouldn't take too long to bake, I don't think. It's still very simple geometry, just a few more sources, so it should only take a couple times longer, a few times longer. And again, it's like, you can see that it's doing something. You can hear your computer working on it, but it does not give you very much of a progress update. And this might be a situation too where it's like, okay, I probably should have it on GPU preview mode, which is faster. Oh yeah, exactly. The moment that you ask. Yes, exactly. Like, I think CPU is more accurate or something like that. I'm not sure. In fact, let's see. Cancel. GPU. Generate again. It's like instant. Oh yeah, way bigger difference than even I thought. Okay, so the fog does not reflect this change until you bake it again, so we will have to do that. I'm actually quite happy that they have this restart in DirectX 12. I swear in an older version you had to manually go into project settings, but it turns out that's just doesn't even matter. So restart. Not sure what that was about. I think I thought the project was already open, but it wasn't. It may have crashed. Okay. That is one way to restart. But yeah, I don't know. It's like, for some reason, the fog tools are like the least easy to use. Did it restart in DirectX 12? It did not. Will it? Instead of seeing if it complains again, I'm just going to do it myself. Player, under project settings. Graphics APIs, 12. Move it up. Restart. You can imagine too, if you have a really big project, if you have lots of mods in your Marrow project, this restarting is going to take a long time. So ideally, you get the fog working in a little sample, and once you know that there's no issues, set up a lot before you bake it again. Like, make sure it's really what you want, right? You don't want to have to wait for your editor to restart over and over and over again. Bake volumetrics. And you'll see that it's generating a volume map texture. Now, actually, if this volume map was being affected by the lights around it, it would not just be gray, it would have color. Failed to load script object. That is a little odd. What if I'm going to delete the existing one and get it to bake a brand new one. Let's try it without the skybox contribution too. Save. Volumetric. Well, let's see if it did work or not. That is a little bit odd. Let's double check. Okay. And again, it's like, it's sort of in 12, but not quite. Wonder, what if I just add 12 to the list and try again? Is it going to have the same error? 0 seconds. That doesn't sound good. Save and restart. You can imagine how annoying this would be if you've got no idea what you're doing. Like, I've used a fog in all my maps, and even I forget why this stuff happens. Let's say, oh. So this time I restarted it and it actually shows that it did bake correctly. Like, I'm pretty sure the fog is being affected by the lighting. So let's go. It's just the volume map, I didn't think it would appear gray here once the lights were affecting it. So I guess it did work, it's just I assumed it did not. And now it's still in DirectX 12, but I think it's in 11, so I'm just gonna manually restart it. Okay. See, I just gotta stick with the process. It's sometimes something works, and I just assume, no, it couldn't have possibly done its job, and it just did. So there we go. Look at that. So this is the strength of the volumetric fog. Of course, this light is so bright it looks unnatural in the fog, but the fog is actually interacting with the light. Let's make it a little denser so you can see. Global. Lower the view distance. In fact, you can raise the light multiplier and it will also affect how it's multiplying all the baked lights. So like, let's say you made the view distance really far and then you made the light multiplier higher, you're going to get this massive bloom from your light. So if you wanted colored fog, this is kind of the way that you would do it. You would have it be reflecting the lighting in the scene. At least if you want it to be multicolored. If you just want one color, you just change your fog color here. You know, you just make it all red. But if you leave it as white, now it can represent multiple colors at once. I hope that wasn't too confusing with all the restarting and stuff. I kind of overcomplicated it and confused myself. Again, there will be an edited down version of this workshop posted after the fact to make things a little easier to follow along, especially in situations where that happens. I think that's it for fog here. Let me just double check. One other little thing you can do, by the way, is you can add post-processing overrides for things like chromatic aberration, so like the colors in the scene separating on the edge of the object. You know, you can add bloom, film grain. I mean, I'm literally just reading them off, but they're there. There's a few like lens distortion that work, but don't really preview in the editor for some reason. I don't know why that is. But you can use those for things like if you're underwater in a map, for instance, those look really good. You do things like make the everything tinted blue, maybe desaturate it a bit, maybe make it a little darker, whatever, right? But that should be it for volumes. Okay. Now we're getting into some more ways to customize your level, starting with music and ambience, right? Now, if you take this little sample scene, right, like I did, you'll start with a zones object and a little zone within it. Now, zones are basically a way that the SDK compartmentalizes your level, right? Like, everything that's spawned within a zone will be managed by that zone. For a simple level, it doesn't even really matter. You know, you just have the whole level loaded or not at all. In the future, we'll make more complex levels where zones are actually loading and unloading sections of the level for performance. So, for instance, you could have a ton of objects arranged in a room, have the player knock them around, and then when they leave, it remembers the state of the room, but it unloads it. So we'll cover that later. But a second use for zones here is that they react to objects, and players, and creatures. So, for instance, and the zones come with all these scripts. We'll cover this later. This little starter zone does everything for you just as is. And would you look at that? It comes with zone ambience. So notice the volume is very low. It's at 0.1. You probably want to keep it at 0.1 or lower. Because if I'm being honest, a lot of ambient and music tracks are very loud tracks by default. Basically, anytime you enter a zone with zone ambience or zone music, it will activate. And there's a few settings for this, right? Zone ambience, not so much. You have the volume, you have how long it takes to fade in as you enter the zone, how long it takes to fade out as you leave. There's even a few little reverb presets. And then I think the reverb settings here maybe affect other sounds. I'm not 100% on that. And then you have your ambient track. So you have all these ambient tracks, and they're kind of mixed in with the music tracks, but they're all from Bonelab and Boneworks. Do you have a single Unity project, all of your maps separated into scenes, or do you make a new project every map? Just one project. You might have seen in Unity Hub I have 2 right now. That's just because I wanted to have one for the tutorials so that you don't see all the stuff I'm working on and have it take forever to load. But yeah, just one. Like for instance, in the asset warehouse, you can go to your level and you can like double click on it and it will automatically load that level's scene and unload the other ones. Or if you're making a spawnable, you can just make it in a level scene, or you can make like a prefab. We'll have like a whole spawnable workshop in the future, but yeah, just one project. And that's going to save you a ton of file space too. Like Unity hogs up a lot. But yeah, basically, you have all these what they call mono discs, so audio tracks from Bonelab and Boneworks, and you can also add your own. Now, you don't really have to for music. You can just give it a straight audio file. For some reason, Ambience needs a mono disc. All you have to do for a mono disc, right, is you just go to your mod, add a new data card, mono disc, and it will let you select like an audio file. And the nice thing is, if you use mono discs, you can make your mod a dependency for other mods. So you can make a mod that just contains a bunch of music, and then other people can plug it into their mod and say, hey, if you install this mod, there's music tracks that will play, and you'll only have one copy of that music track on your computer, even though you have 10 mods using it. So that's kind of what these are for. It's so that if you have big files, like especially with music tracks, right? If you have like a 5-minute music track that's like high quality, you don't really want to have duplicates of that laying around. So this solves that problem for you. Going back to the zone though, so you can choose that for your zone ambience, pretty straightforward. Let's remove that for now. Oh, and also every zone event, you can choose primary, which just means when you enter the zone, it goes off. If you have other zones linked to it, which we'll get into in a future tutorial, you can choose secondary, which means like, oh, the music starts when you enter a neighboring zone. That's all that's for. So here, for instance, for the music, we could choose a track. And again, it's not just showing you music tracks, it's showing ambience at the same time. So like, some of them can be hard to tell. I think some of the dungeon ones are music and some of the dungeon ones are ambience. But like, oh, there you go, Funky Park, right? The halfway park song, I believe. Set the volume. And then you can do some fun things with the music tracks. You can make it so it plays when you enter it. In the future, we'll go over logic where you can manually make it play and stop. You can make it so it stops when you enter. So like, for instance, you could have no music track selected here and make it stop all music. So you could have like a dramatic pause when you enter a room. Maybe like a fight breaks out shortly after. You could choose whether it stops when you leave. So for instance, here we have a small zone, but because you spawn in it, we can have it play on enter, but not stop when you leave, and you'll just always hear the music. Only trigger once basically means if you stop it at any point, it will not play it when you re-enter. Like in this case, we only need it to trigger once. And this is kind of nice too, like if you're playing a map and you backtrack and you go into a room where there was a big battle, but now the enemies are all dead, you don't really want the battle music to start again. You maybe just want to hear ambience, you know, you don't want it to hype you up for something that's not there anymore. So only trigger once is a pretty good default. Now you can choose if it loops. So obviously the songs here are made to loop, so you can check that. Some of the songs even have an intro track. And I think if you search intro, you'll see the ones that do. So if you chose something like Fist Fight Fugue, you could have it play the intro track first and then keep looping the main song. And that's about it for zone music. Oh yes. So another thing, okay? If you take your zone, create an empty object, I'm going to call this like zone 3D sound. And you search zone while adding a component, you will see okay, never mind. I was going to show a feature that's actually in the extended SDK. We'll go over that later because I'm not going to start with the extended SDK in this series. But basically there's a feature where you can have a 3D sound source that's like ambience, but you can hear where it's coming from. For now, you can do that using, and I'll just make one here, using an audio source. But there's some jank here. There's some work you have to do to make it so that it does not destroy your hearing or annoy people playing on your map or just not work at all, right? So, a few things. When you place your audio source, you can choose a sound file. Output, we don't set that right now. It doesn't really have mixer groups for you to choose from anyway. You can choose if it's muted, which later on we'll go over like the logic that you can use to manually affect this stuff. You can choose if it loops, if it plays on awake, which basically means as soon as you load the level or load a zone that has this, it will play it. And then a few other settings here. Priority, I'd just leave as is. Volume, again, a lot of sound effects tend to be pretty high, so like volume, you probably want to start low and then see if it needs to go higher or lower. Pitch and everything. Now this is important, spatial blend. If you want it to actually come from this location, you want to set it to 3D. And then also, we have volume roll-off. And they may have fixed this, but when I learned how to use these, you had to set it to linear or it just would not work. So that basically means if you're twice as far, it will be half the volume. Then you get to choose, okay, how close do you have to be for it to be max volume? So that's this first bubble, the minimum distance. So when you're any closer than this, it just stays at that volume. It doesn't get any louder, right? And then you have the big bubble, the max distance. So on the edge of this bubble, you can't hear it, and then it blends towards max volume, or towards the volume you've set when you reach minimum distance. Now here's the thing with audio sources, right? The SDK doesn't support them properly yet, so it will not obey your volume settings in-game, like sound effects, music, etc. What ends up happening because of that is you will start loading into your map and you will hear all your audio sources at once, and you will hear them all at full volume. Not the volume you set, you will hear it at the volume that like the audio file is at. And you will want to plug your ears, it will be loud. So how do we solve that, right? We want this to obey our volume, and we don't want to hear it in the loading screen. Well, we can use a little system called alt events for that. And alt events is like simple cause and effect logic that's built into the SDK. And this is going to look somewhat complex, but it's actually very few steps. And believe me, if you use audio sources, people are going to really appreciate that you do this. So just follow along, and you can copy paste this and reuse the logic after the fact. It's very simple. Okay. So what we want to do, right, is we want to assign an audio mixer group, like a volume control, right? Like sound effects volume, music volume. But as you can see, they're not in the list here. They're not part of the project because everything's dummy scripts. It doesn't have actual access to the mixer groups in Bonelab. So we're going to add a little logic here. And this logic is using what we call alt events. We're going to add an alt event holder. Give it a few events. And let me just refer to my notes to make sure. Where did I put that? Okay. Somewhere down here. Okay. So first we need to locate our audio mixer group. Since it's not in the list, we have to do that using alt events. So this is kind of like a workaround method. I assume you won't have to in the future, or there'll just be a script that does this for you, right? You won't have to use audio sources. There will be some quality of life thing, at least I hope. It would be evil if they left it like this. So in our first event, we want to choose static method. So that means we're selecting something that's not related to an existing object in the scene. It's just part of the project. We can click on no type here. And you see we'll get this crazy list of stuff. Okay. Well, we're looking for audio mixer groups, right? Let me see. Now, depending on how I do it, mixer. Okay, I think I was right the first time. Audio mixer group. Which one here? Okay, I really should have wrote my notes better for this part. Let's see if it's the first one. Audio mixer group. Nah. Okay. I'm actually wondering if you need the extended SDK or not for this. I don't think you did. I thought it was just audio mixer group and not one of these other ones. Surely it's not controller. Okay, just to be sure, let me take a little peek at my other project. Dude, if this is an extended SDK thing too, my very next workshop is just going to be extended SDK stuff, because there's some stuff I've been taking for granted from there. You can see why I'm using a separate project for the tutorial too. Like my my main modding project is pretty massive. Actually, 1 second. I've got stuff I don't want to spoil from collabs in that project. I'll give you something to look at. Maybe without the music though. But no, basically, I want to see if what I'm looking for exists in my project that has the extended SDK. Because if it does, that's what's missing. Shouldn't take too much longer. I'm kind of at the point where I should probably back up some of my mods to like an external drive or something, just so that it's not files that have to be loaded when I open the project up. Okay. So I'm just going to see here, because I'm pretty sure I have a sound effect that's doing this already in this scene, which I can't show because it's related to another project. Let's see. I am using SLZ Marrow 3D Manager. Okay, it's completely different than what I was searching for. I don't know what I was writing in my notes there. I'm gonna just put this on my second monitor. And oh, there we go. Okay, we're back. So I was looking for the wrong thing, I guess. slz.marrow. Oh, what was that again? Was Marrow Audio 3D Manager. I'm just gonna search for Audio 3D. Okay. It must only be in the extended SDK. Okay, so that sucks. I was going to show how to make these audio sources behave. For now, I'd honestly recommend you do not use them. There might be an alternative here. Let's see. Not new script. Marrow SDK. And they have so little in the official SDK right now, though. Yeah. Okay. We'll have to cover that in a future tutorial. Sorry for wasting your time a little there. That's crazy though. That's such a fundamental feature. I thought that would be in the official SDK. That's kind of rough. All right. So moving on from sounds. Oh yeah. Zone aggro. I cannot fathom why this is not the default. Add a component to your zone called zone aggro. And you'll see it's already set up. It looks for beings and you just throw a tag in there. You can ignore all of this. Just add zone aggro to your zone. And what this does is if you're standing in the zone and an AI character, an NPC, is also standing in that zone, they will react to your proximity to them, and they will hear gunshots and they will get angry when you fire. And I'm pretty sure later on when we cover like the logic stuff properly, I'm pretty sure there's like a way to tell the zone aggro like, oh, someone just walked in, immediately attack them. Okay, I'm dissing the SDK. It did come with the zone aggro on it. Man, it's falling apart, guys. All right. And so we just got 3 more topics to cover. I'm going to show you how to build using the Marrow Backlot Assets, which are basically models that come with those little grid textures I showed at the start. I'm going to show you how to bake Occlusion Culling, which basically hides models that are out of view or that are obstructed by other models for performance, especially for large maps. And then I'm going to show you how to bake a Navmesh so the AI can walk. And then we'll go over how you pack your map and how you test it. So just the kind of the fun final things here, right? Starting with the backlot assets, this is easy peasy, guys. The only thing that trips me up is when I first got it all installed, I thought it was missing and I searched for it forever. And then I realized, oh, it's in packages instead of assets. You go packages, Marrow Backlot, grid. There's also other stuff in here we'll get into later for circuitry, like levers and stuff that you can make work. And then you can go to prefabs and you'll see we've got these different categories, right? Like ramps, walls, rooms. Let's start with bases. And you'll see we've got these kind of rectangular platforms. You can just drag any of these in. Though I really recommend, you see how this is getting real messy, right? I recommend you make empty objects to organize this. Like we can have a lighting object. Try and select them all here. Oh, there already is one. My bad. Get rid of that audio source. Maybe we have an object for like volumes. Put our fog in there. Just kind of move this stuff up to the top out of the way. Around, put outside of that. Got our zones. The camera, we can just disable that ahead of time while we remember. You know, all that will happen is you won't see the fog until you actually play the level. And then let's make another empty and we'll just have this be like backlot parts. And we'll put it inside of that just to keep things organized, right? Now, another nice little trick here. Let's say you've opened a bunch of stuff. Well, when you collapse it and open it again, it's still going to be opened. It's going to be disorganized. If you hold Alt and you collapse it, the next time you open it, it will be all sorted for you. And likewise, if you hold Alt and you open it, it will show you everything. So just a little tip there. That's going to save you some time, especially if you make a big level. But basically, these backlot parts, they're static by default. They have collision by default. They have UV mapping, so like it tells it when to tile the texture and where to spread it across by default. So you can do things like drag these in, swap the colors, and they have like different sizes of boxes and everything here. You could put on glowing ones, and when you bake lighting, it will affect the lighting. Let's just use like blue, whatever. I'm going to drag other ones on. And let's throw some more pieces on. I'm going to show you how to do grid snapping. Because let's say you've got these pieces, right? Well, you don't really want to just grab this and try to line it up by hand. You're never going to get it right. And once you make more advanced structures, those little seams and cracks are going to add up, and you're going to have bigger seams and cracks once they meet back around, right? And again, let's try and keep things organized in here. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use grid snapping. And when you use the grid snapping, you can choose, oh, do you want it to move 1 meter at a time? Or 2? Or half a meter? It's going to be the size of this grid you see in the background. The one thing you have to keep in mind though is if you are not snapping by whole numbers, let's say you're doing 1.5 meters, there's a little issue that's going to happen. Not a big issue, and I'm going to show you what that is. And you'll also notice it snaps to the nearest intersection of the grid. It will take your cursor. So you want to have it set to pivot. Basically what that means is they've set up a pivot point on the bottom where the grid meets on this so that it snaps to the grid perfectly. If you have this set to center, you'll see now it's half in. It's going to be trickier to line stuff up. So keep it on pivot. Now, you're going to notice something here. We're snapping to the grid, but the position has all this extra stuff in the decimals. And that is basically imprecision from it doing the math from moving it. And that is going to cause, let's duplicate this. Over time, that imprecision, and I'm just going to turn off snapping as an example here, is going to have little seams like this, even smaller than this. They're going to be so small you might only see them in VR. So to fix that, there's going to be cases where you want to get rid of extra decimal points. You only need 2. And really, you can wait to do this until you see an issue. But you're basically rounding the number so that they fit snugly together. Alternatively, if you don't want to do the work, select all of them, right? And I think select center, so you're scaling it from the center. It might not actually matter. Click this little link so that you're adjusting all 3 scales at the same time, and just scale it up a tiny bit. And what that's basically going to do is it's going to make it, and I don't even know if I can zoom in far enough to show you. You can almost see it there. It's going to make it so that they overlap. That's a better example. But of course, too much. So if you didn't want to fix the little imprecisions, you can do it that way. Now, the imprecision, if I enable it again, if I recall, yes, okay. Let's select one that doesn't have the issue right now. You turn off grid snapping and you increment by a full number, let's say 1. That means when you hold control, it will add or remove 1 when you move it. You'll see this doesn't have the imprecision issues. So what I recommend is when you're building with backlot assets, put them at 0, 0, 0, put them at the start. You can do this by just dragging it into the hierarchy instead of the scene, right? It'll be right at the start of the scene. And instead of using grid snapping, just use increment snapping. Just hold control when you move it around. And then it will do perfect math for the actual position of these parts. And then when you do need to move it a bit using grid snapping, well, you'll actually see it doesn't have the issue when it's already a whole number. When you have like a decimal place, maybe it's actually just some parts that do it worse than others. But yeah, there's these weird little inconsistencies, so just bear that in mind. Like if you move it with increments and then you move it with grid snap later, stuff's going to line up a little better. Bear that in mind. And increment snapping also can affect rotation. So for instance, you could set this to, this is in degrees, you can set to 90, so that when you're rotating, you can hold control to just go, keep things nice and clean. Same with scaling, right? So if it's set to 1, it's going to be multiples of the size it already is. So it's going to be double or nothing. You might want it to be like 0.5, so you can do like 1.5, 2, half. You get the picture. And again, right, set stuff to pivot when you're moving it around. Part of what this comes with too is you can get, let's see here, walls. Now they're called walls, you can use them for any surface. And they are basically, they have the texture on one side, nothing on the other side. So these are very optimized for building. Like if you're making a room and you're not going to see the other side of the wall, you just use this. And if you recall when I was talking about colliders earlier, how paper thin colliders have issues, right? Like one frame something's here and then the other frame it's on the other side, so it doesn't hit it. It doesn't get stopped by it. That's why these are so thick. Now this is overkill. If you want, right? Let's just move our pieces into parts again. If you want, you can go inside this and find the collider. And you can change it. And you can use increment snapping while changing it too if you want. You can make it thinner. If you make it thinner than like, I don't know, 1/6 of a meter, make it thinner than that, you're probably going to have cases where something moves so fast it does pass through. Now that's going to happen very rarely. It's going to be more common once it's really thin. Like this thin is enough for like some cases the player's hand might clip through and then their arm gets stuck. I'm sure you've seen that even in official game levels. So just bear that in mind. When you can make the colliders thicker, do it. I'd say about half as thin as this is as thin as you'd maybe want to go for level geometry, just because items and stuff, you know, you expect them to clip through each other every now and then and you're not going to notice. But the world, you don't want stuff clipping through the world. You don't want stuff falling out of the map or trapping the player. Now you can also line up things like there's ramps in here. I think ramps is where, oh, there's curved ones somewhere here. Corners. Yes. So like check this out, right? Drag corner in. And if you want to get that like real Bonelab kind of pipe style that some rooms have, you can just start placing these around. And they're all made to connect. And this is the other really nice thing, right? We were talking about the mesh colliders earlier and sort of just now. Instead of having it be the really accurate ones where it's like individual paper thin triangles of collision, they actually broke it down into multiple colliders that actually have depth to them. So all of these parts that you can place are made to be reliable with the physics in the game. You know, they actually have stuff backing. So that's really nice. It's like, if you do make levels out of this or prototype levels out of this, it's going to be nice and stable. You're not going to have these annoying issues. There's some things that are weird, like here, for instance, you see the lighting. There's like a weird seam. Sometimes that means you have to go to the mesh for it, right? This converter corners mesh. Click on it to highlight it. And okay, they built it a little bit weird. Okay, I was going to show you can change how the lighting works with it when you add a model to the game. But the way they've done it is a little weird. Usually I import my models as separate ones, but these are all grouped together, so I don't know. Whatever, you just have to live with it. You get it. Okay. I think that's it for Backlot. Let me just double check here. Oh, yes. Okay. So I mentioned prefabs earlier. A prefab is when you take an object in your scene. Let's take a group of objects. And let's create an empty parent containing them, right? So now we can just move this around. And it's one thing. But it's got parts, you can still edit them. If we want to make more of this quickly, we can just drag that into our files, and we now have a prefab of it. So we can add that prefab anytime. And bam. Speeds up your workflow a lot, right? And I think it might also help with performance in some cases, but don't quote me on that. I've done No fact checking on that. Now, one thing to bear in mind, if I select an object, let's select this one, and I say create an empty parent, you're going to notice this parent is at 0, 0. It's at the center. So it's offset. That's kind of annoying, right? Well, you can try to move it, but it'll move the piece. Or you can move the piece to it, but it's going to be annoying. You know, you can move it to 0, 0. Maybe you had it in the perfect spot already, and now it's just creating more work, right? The way to get around this is you right-click and you create an empty child. You'll see that the empty has the same position as the original. And then you put it above the original so that they're separate. You put the original inside it. Now you have a parent that's going to snap perfectly to the grid. And this is the way that I'd recommend you move groups of objects or save prefabs of objects using Backlot. That way you can easily position them later. So like, let's say you make like a pillar for a room. Save that as a prefab, use it elsewhere. Maybe make a wall and you add little like edges to the wall. You add like ramps and slopes and stuff. Save that as a prefab and use it for the other walls in the room or other rooms entirely. This is going to save you a ton of time. And then you can update the original and it'll automatically update the other ones. Or, get this. So we've got two versions of this prefab in the scene right now, right? They have a thing called overrides. We can select one that's in the scene. Let's say this one here. Let's scale it. Make a nice squished version of it. You'll notice even though they are both affected by the original, like if I double click, I can edit it. I can separate these parts, for instance. You'll see it moves them both. But it keeps the change that I made in the scene. There's an override that is allowing this to be different, even though it's copying everything else that's changed. We can go and see them in the inspector. We can see the transform, right? So what dictates the scale of this piece is different. There's an override for it. So we can either revert it so that it mimics the original, or we can change it and then we can apply the override. And now all the other ones will be changed. So you can imagine how much that speeds up your workflow, because if you want something that's 99% the same as something else you've made before, just turn it into a prefab and then have an override that changes that 1%. So you'll be able to make a level this way and it's going to be extremely efficient. Now that really covers it for the Backlot assets. Oh, one last thing. Oh my god, I keep saying that. And they might actually have this already. Yes. When you make colliders, when you make static colliders especially, like for your environment, you want to add the impact properties component. You can either search for it, or if you aren't searching, you can do Marrow SDK and it's just in there. And man, what am I doing? I showed you guys this already, but for anyone new, it lets you choose what happens when like a bullet hits it. It also dictates some things like, if you say it's pure metal, a bullet will not pass through it. If you say it's like thin metal, a bullet will pass through, but it will have less velocity or less damage. So there's all sorts of little things like that where it's like, if you make sure to include these impact properties in your map, it's going to be that much more immersive. The other thing is, if you press space, you can see different overlays that you can add and remove. Some of these we have already, like the tools here is an overlay. View options up here is an overlay. But there's some that come with the SDK. One of these is called Surface Painter. What this does is it gives a color to every impact property, and it lets you preview where they are. And then you can mouse over and see, oh, these are concrete by default. Well, if you want something to be wood, let's say bone in this case, we can click on it, on bone, and then I think you choose bone, click on them, and then just click paint select. Yeah. I don't tend to do it this way. Just a happenstance, really. But this is really nice if you have a very complex thing, because you can select a bunch of stuff in the hierarchy and then paint it. Or you can find things that are missing impact properties and automatically add them. And it will also, you'll see here, apply physics materials. It will apply those collider materials for you by default to make it so that it has the right amounts of bounciness and friction. Now, if we close Surface Painter, there's another one. Actually, I was going to cover this way sooner. This is how you add Bonelab content to your map, right? You just open your asset warehouse, find Bonelab content, and then find the type you want. Really, spawnables are the only ones you're going to use here. And you can search, you can either search for it in here, or, like, let's say you want an AKM first. Bam, just drag that thing in. And when you load the map in, it's going to appear. Here's the thing though. If you don't want to do this in the asset warehouse, there's an overlay for that as well. Please press space, asset warehouse spawner, AW spawner. I think you have to click initialize first. There we go. And I think preview is supposed to show you a preview of the model. Grid. I'm not sure why I don't have model previews for them, to be honest with you. But anyways, this is just spawnables. And you can search in here. AKM, for instance. Drag it in. So that way you don't end up, messing up any organization in here. It's basically the same thing though. I just figured it'd be worth showing. Same thing, like this little drop down here for showing the volumetrics, it's also in here. I think that's the same. That might actually be a Unity thing. I'm making it up as I go, guys. I'm a fake expert, all right? And then there's some zone stuff, which we'll get into in a future video. But basically, that's all that you need to know for making your own customized map for the time being. There's some stuff that I want to do another tutorial on very soon. Like, for instance, some extended SDK stuff related to audio. I want to show some examples of actually setting up like the materials properly, maybe making some materials. But that's all going to be in a future video. For now, I want to wrap this up by showing you how you can pack your map and how you can test it yourself and how you can upload it as well. Now, I'd also just want to point out, like, if you are following these workshops and you make something and it's like looks exactly like the workshop, I'm not going to stop you from uploading it, but just bear in mind, like, if a lot of people do that, we're going to end up with a lot of maps that look the same on the workshop. And people are going to be less interested in checking them out. So, like, do keep that in mind. If you have an original idea, I really recommend you work on it. Even if you can't finish it, like, just try, right? You're going to get better at mapping. You're going to have your own, like, original environments that people can come back to. They can see it evolve. Or maybe you just make something else afterwards, right? But give yourself room to get that sense of accomplishment of actually finishing something. And if you get stuck, maybe just move on to another thing, right? But if you want to get better at modding, you got to have the experience. You got to try things out. So I guess keep up some momentum is what I'm saying, and try to be original when you can. With that being said, let's look at how you pack your maps, right? Now, if you're playing on PC, it's going to be a lot easier to pack and test your map, because all you have to do is go to your asset warehouse, select your mod palette. So really, if you, for instance, have your level in your mod and you have items, you're going to have to pack the whole thing. So I've got my tutorial mod, and it happens to contain the level. Well, what you can do is you can say pack palette, and you can say pack for PC or pack for Quest. Well, here's the thing, right? you pack for PC, it will automatically give you a button after to install it to PC as well. And that means that you just click one button, wait, click another button. You can load right into your map. You can test it because it'll be in your level selection in-game right after. If you pack it for Quest, you're going to have to like manually manage the files and stuff. At that point, it's probably easier to like privately upload it to mod.io. But just as an example here, pack for PC. And the first time you pack your map, it's going to take a while, depending on how much assets you have. It's going to tell you need to save. The more materials and textures that you have in your map, the longer it's going to take to pack, because it has to optimize them. It has to prepare them to run well in the game. At least that's kind of my layman's understanding of it. So the first time you pack and there's like new materials and textures in the scene, it's going to take a while. If you don't add any more, the next pack is going to be very quick because it's just going to be the changes you made. And then if you add more textures and materials, it might take a while again. So just be prepared for that. This scene is so simple though, it's really not going to take a while. It's this step here, preparing variants, that is going to take a while anytime you add new materials. And it's basically going to go through every single shader and every material using that shader one at a time. Oh, and there's one more thing that I'll show you once this is done packing, which is, well, we'll get to it. I'll just wait a minute because I don't think it's going to be very long. But basically, sometimes the Bonelab content disappears, and there's actually one very small thing you have to do to fix it. It takes like 2 seconds. While I wait for this, let's just close some of these background tasks here. There we go. But yeah, basically, the weight that we have right now, it's going to take like 5% as long to pack again if we just move stuff around, you know, if we just create new stuff with the materials that are already there. It's just this this initial packing that takes a long time. Same thing if you pack for Quest, by the way, like it has to pack it differently to optimize it for the Quest. Like it does like compression and stuff for you automatically. So packing for Quest will take even longer. So just be prepared for that. Not gonna lie, I thought this would be faster. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to improvise here. In the meantime, let's say that your map is done packing. Let's say you've tested it and you're like, well, I want to share this with friends now, right? Well, you can go to your Unity projects. Let's actually go to, got my assets from my other mods here. There's going to be a built palettes folder, right? When you pack your mod for PC, it's going to put it in the Windows one. When you pack your mod for Quest, it's going to put it in the Android one. All you have to do to upload it to mod.io is you choose the platform you want to upload first, right? You right click on it and you just send it to a zip. You can name the zip whatever you want. Maybe, you know, name it something that's easy to remember, upload it, and then bam, you just delete it right after. So what this is like, this folder contains all your mod stuff, right? So you're just zipping the folder up and uploading that as a file to mod.io. I don't really have to show you the whole upload process for mod.io. They make it very straightforward. But yeah, you're just making a zip of these built palettes. And all that it's doing when you pack for PC and click install, which hopefully we'll see soon, hopefully this doesn't take like 10 minutes or something, is it's taking the folder and it's pasting it in like, it's something like app data roaming. App data local low, stress level 0, Bonelab mod. Yeah. So that's all that it's doing, is it's automatically moving it there for you. And the nice thing too is, if you pack for PC and you install it, and then you upload it to mod.io, you don't even have to be subscribed to your mod, because the version will be the same. So people who got it from mod.io can play with you even though you just installed it manually from Unity. So you don't have to do anything like subscribe to it and then wait for it to install again. Like, you just keep it all local on your PC and it'll all stay compatible. Just, you know, if there's a version difference, it's going to obviously have inconsistencies. Like, for instance, if you're working on an avatar and you make changes, your avatar might just fail to load or fail to download for someone else in like in the Fusion mod, right? Like in multiplayer. Okay. I really do want to wait for this though, just so I can demonstrate like the map loading in and everything, because if there's anything vital that I missed, if there's any like issue in the map scene, I want to know so that I can show you how to fix it, include that in the video. I think everything that's been done so far has been straightforward enough that there isn't going to be like weird issues like that, but I want to cross my T's and dot my I's, right? Don't want to be feeding you guys fake info. Especially after streaming for what? It's been like 3 hours now. That would be pretty anticlimactic if you followed along every step and then it just had some issue and you're like, okay, what did you tell me to do that was wrong, right? This really does seem like it's going to take a while though. Because I think it already finished the regular Litmus standard or whatever ones. Now it's onto the triplanar, which is like, I have one of them. So it might be done after this. It's just chugging along real slow though. But yeah, you can imagine why you might want to set some time aside to let this compile and just leave it running in the background or something. especially the first time. Like, it doesn't even take this long to compile like my pool rooms map. It takes like maybe 1 minute. But this is just, it has to do all this extra work the first time. Another thing too, like once this live stream's done, the next thing I'm going to do is, if it lets me, I think it will let me, is add like timestamps. Just so people can skip through it before I'm finished editing down like a recap version. But yeah, this kind of thing is part of the reason why I've got that separate video first, right, of the Marrow SDK project setup. Because you could imagine if the live stream started with, okay, well, now we're going to install Unity. And then someone's like watching the stream and installing it at the same time, waiting for it to download, etc. This would probably be like, the stream would probably be an hour longer before there's even like interesting stuff to show. I swear, if it finishes this one and there's another one. Cross your fingers, guys. Yeah, you said it. And I mean, it's even worse if you're live streaming, right? It's like you're live streaming, waiting for it to finish. You can't just like put on a YouTube video or something. I mean, I guess you could, but it would be unconventional. Oh, thank God. And then again, you'll see this, there's this whole gray screen thing. It's just, yeah, just the volumetrics again. Turn it off and on, it fixes itself. And if it doesn't turn on, you just need the camera. So, our palette's packed. We can click install. You'll see it tells you where it's moved it to for you. And it should be in game now. So I'm just going to start up the game. And we'll take a peek and we'll just make sure everything is working as intended, right? Let's see. I think the preview and everything should be up here as well. I will say though, I'm glad that I got a streaming setup that like the audio seems to be reliable. Switching scenes is pretty easy. Like stuff's nice and streamlined and runs well. I've tweaked my setup for years and years despite rarely ever posting anything, so the fact that it's actually like working nicely helps a lot. Just knowing that you can like start the stream 5 minutes before and it just works, you know, very little to troubleshoot. Let me switch to my, or actually let me see if my headset needs to be restarted first. Actually, got a scene collection that should capture just the game. One sec. Hopefully it doesn't interrupt stream. If it does, I'll just start it back up. Alright, perfect. 1 second. I think the headset needs to be restarted first. I don't know if it's just an issue with my index or what, but there's like a 50-50 chance that it won't track until I restart SteamVR one time. There we go. Start her back up. Perfect. I'm gonna switch to the VR mic here. I'll be right back. Okay, seems to be working. Let me just see if spectator's set up right. Oh yeah. Okay, so I think, what did I even call it? I called it tutorial or something like that, right? Let's see. Tutorial world. There. So it's there already. Load right in. And we have... Okay, I'll show you how to fix this, because this is just a little issue. It happens sometimes. But you'll see we've got our AKMs. Let's get a little ammo. I don't think we set a material for the ground here, so it's just going to be whatever. Or we set it to like metal or something. Maybe. But you'll see. Oh. Shut off a controller by mistake, I guess. I hope the battery isn't low. Okay, no, just a fluke. We've got our music in the background. Our volumetric fog looks correct. We've got our impact properties on the surfaces. Nice, reliable collision. You see we've got our reflections looking fairly convincing, but again, because these are from probes, you'll notice it's not actually reflecting what's really there unless it's on the screen, because that default material has screen space reflections as well. So it combines the two to try and make it look more natural. If we fly up, you can really kind of see what's going on with the fog volumes here. And this is also a reason why you might want the density higher for the detail, is it's kind of got this pixelation in a sense where it's popping little fog particles in and out. if it's more dense or a higher density ratio or something, I forget what they call it. If it's got more little pieces making it up, then you won't notice that as much. And I think, I might be wrong about this, I haven't really got to try this out, but I think if you shine a flashlight through it, it maybe reacts. I think it's too bright for the flashlight to make much of a difference. I don't know. You might have to find that out on your own. While I'm here, I'm trying to think of whether there's anything else that I wanted to cover. There is one thing, which is sometimes you'll have some issues. Like, for instance, I was saying if you leave like a camera enabled in the scene, it'll like take away your point of view. And you really don't want to have to wait forever for it to pack again. I really recommend you get Unity Explorer. It's this little code mod that lets you do... Let's see if I get the right key. Oh, I think I have to select the window. Oh, excuse the mouse. F. Okay, maybe I don't even have it on. But there's this code mod called Unity Explorer. For any Unity game, I think you need a version... There was some special version you had to get to make it work. I forget if it was Bonelab specific or like a Unity version specific. But it allows you to, on your desktop, see a breakdown of the scene hierarchy and edit the components in real time. So if you, for instance, left a camera in the scene by mistake, you can go and delete it remotely. Or if something like, if your fog volume, you forgot to turn it into a trigger collider, it actually is physical, you could switch that in Unity Explorer and then just test your map and not have to pack it again until next time. So that sort of thing's pretty cool. Now, I'm just going to hop back into Unity and show you why this void text is here. And one other solution to one other problem. So I'll be right back here. Okay, so first things first is the void text. Now, if we click on this, the void text is like a placeholder for when the model doesn't load in. Case in point. Okay, I don't know how to get it to appear on its own. Snapping. Usually it's visible when I fix it. Like usually it'll be like, actually, I'm noticing if I drag the gun in from like here, from the asset warehouse, let's do with a cartridge. It's just a regular thing. It's white, it's just an object. When I drag it in from this thing, the asset warehouse spawner, it does it as a prefab. Whatever. Rename. I'm wondering if that's confusing it somehow. I'm going to say to unpack the prefab. You'll notice it doesn't seem to have a model now. That's so weird. I never use that, so I guess drag stuff in from asset warehouse, that seems to be pretty reliable for me. But also, if you ever see the void text in the editor, it's just like a temporary model that adds to it, and you can just delete it. It'll appear as like an empty inside of it. I don't know. I was hoping I could show you how to fix that, but that was like a uniquely weird situation for some reason. Now, one more thing. Sometimes you will pack your mod and you'll have to cancel it. You'll be like, oh, whatever, I need to fix something real quick first. And as soon as you cancel it, this asset warehouse window will be completely blank. You'll be like, oh no, what did I do? You know, like all this backlot stuff, all this Bonelab stuff, it'll just be gone. But it's actually a really easy fix. You just go to your, I think it's preferences, Marrow SDK. Yeah. Basically, sometimes if the pack gets interrupted, I don't know why it does this. It's like a safe feature. It's got the Bonelab install location, right? There we go. It's got the Bonelab install location, and it's got a check mark next to it. If you interrupt your pack, it will go, it'll remove the check mark. And let's refresh. And it'll be like, oh, Bonelab gone. And all your spawnables, oops, void. What happened? I'm surprised I haven't seen the official guides cover this, but yeah, if you interrupt your pack, you just have to check that again. And then refresh your palettes. And it's fixed. So I've seen a few people run into that before, and thankfully they get help really quick on the Discord, right? But yeah, if you ever have that issue, that's what's going on. Let me just check my notes. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Why do I keep saying that? Okay, Occlusion Culling and baking the Navmesh really fast. If you have static geometry, you know, floors to walk on, you want the NPCs to be able to walk on that, right? All you got to do is go to Window, and I think, let's see, is it General? It's in here somewhere. Not rendering. AI. Duh. Navigation. We want to add the navigation window. And all we have to do, go to agents. See how there's a humanoid agent? We want to set it to roughly the same size as like a humanoid character in Bonelab. So if I remember correctly, 1.85 meters tall. 1.5, like half a meter radius is fine. I think in my other project I had it set to 0.4 and that worked too. Step height is just how high they'll attempt to step. Yeah, 75 is fine. Max slope, I just crank that up. Let them try, even if they're terrible at climbing up slopes. They'll try to go up a slope unless it's steeper than 60 degrees. Areas, we leave that as is. Now for baking. This is the baked agent. It will, you can kind of think of it as, and this isn't exactly what it's doing, but you think of it as, it's going to make this little character, and it's going to quickly test to see how it could possibly walk around everywhere, and where it should avoid falling, where it should avoid hitting a wall. And then our agents are going to follow that. So we can set this to like the same as our agent. If we wanted the Navmesh to be more conservative, you know, to not let them go into as many areas, we'd make it so that this is like bigger than the character. If we wanted them to try to go into spaces that they maybe don't perfectly fit into, we'd make this smaller than the character so that the Navmesh is generated for more. Like here, for instance, we've got a step height of almost a meter, 0.75 for this character. We might as well imitate that here. Same with the slope, crank that up. And then these off mesh links are not really something I've done, so I'd have to cover that later on after I actually know. But it's basically what they use in some of the arena maps where the characters like jump up and down slopes and through windows and stuff. That's what they use these for. Okay. So now, as long as all the floors and walls that we want included in our bake are set to static, all we have to do now is click bake. And we'll get a little preview as long as we're in this navigation tab. So you can see, this is where if you can imagine the character standing over the edge of any of these. This is how close he would get to the edge. So for instance, here, it knows that it can step up a little bit and walk along this. It would not try to go across this gap because it's not filled out correct. It would not try to go between these two. And it would try to step up here, but it would probably fail. So it would like bump into it. That's kind of how you can look at this. And you can kind of look at the areas tab to see, like blue is walkable, purple is not walkable. So if there's a low ceiling, you'd maybe see some purple. And then red is jump. So if you had those links, which I don't really know how to set up yet, you'd probably see some red stretching between jumpable areas. Okay, so that's navigation. That's all you have to do. And then got a little overlay for showing Navmesh too. Now the second one is ambient occlusion, and that's the same thing. It's got its own little window in here. I think rendering, or I called it ambient occlusion, didn't I? Occlusion Culling. So, occlusion culling. The default parameter is actually pretty good. Basically, what this is saying here is an object has to be at least, I think it's in width or radius or something. It's like, it has to be like 5 meters wide to be able to hide other objects. And here it's saying, if this large 5 meters or bigger object has a hole in it, that hole has to be 1/4 of a meter wide or bigger. Otherwise, you'll maybe have some issues. You can make this smaller and the culling will have fewer issues, like you'll see less popping, but it will be less performant. It'll be less efficient. And then backface threshold 100 is fine. It's just, don't even worry about that. So that's all you have to do is default settings, really, bake. Now, what it's going to do, we can select a camera and enable the camera for this. And go to occlusion again. So now we are visualizing the occlusion through this camera. So we can see if the player was looking this way, this stuff is not being rendered. It's saving performance. If you look around, it's rendering it before it pops into view, just before. And if we go behind an object, let's use the real big one as an example. Real big square. If we are directly behind it, it knows that it's obscuring the view of the rest of the level and hides it until we peek back around. So if you have a level that's not split up into zones, which we'll look more into later in like another video, this will save you a ton of performance, especially if there's a lot of like little model details and whatnot in your level, because it's going to hide everything behind you, hide everything behind a big object, and it's going to take into account like gaps in the objects and let you peek through. And then again, remember to disable your camera before you pack it again. Okay, is that everything? Okay, for real this time, that is everything. So I'd like to thank everyone that showed up today for the tutorial, or if you're watching it in post, same deal, right? I hope that you learned something new today. I'm going to add some timestamps and I'm going to make an edited down version of this. I'm not even sure how many people are here still, like 3 or something. The YouTube streaming window is not usually that accurate. But yeah, if you have any questions before I go, now would be the time to ask them. And then, yeah, I'll have to get straight to editing this thing. Oh, and by all means, if you make anything following my tutorials, like, don't be shy to like DM me and show me what you made or ask questions or whatever. My plan is that maybe even before the next tutorial, I'll set up like a Discord so that people can share progress, share what they made in the tutorials, ask for help, that kind of thing. And that way I can help, but other people that followed the tutorials can help each other too, in case I'm like at work or something. You know, maybe you have to wait a while for an answer. Someone else actually has it. But yeah, I think that's about it. Well, you folks, oh, here, I just got your question. Will you cover taking images for the maps to post on mod.io? Good question. Okay. There are a few methods that I recommend for this, right? One of them is I recommend you get, let me pull this up, scene making utilities. Scene making tools. Scene making tools adds like a seat that can go invisible. It adds light sources, but very importantly, it adds a camera, and you can freeze the camera's position in the air. And the reason this is so handy is when you pause the game, normally it does like this little third-person perspective thing, but if there's a camera, it will pause and still be looking through it. So what I really like to do for taking images is I'll place the camera and then I'll pause the game to see like in my Steam preview like what the screen looks like. And if it's good, I just do a Windows print screen. And I use that for the thumbnail. If you want it to look really good, let me actually see. I don't know if I can adjust the field of view in Unity, but I can do it with a camera for sure. If you want it to look real good, I recommend you zoom in a lot. And I'll show you why that is. This is just like photography now. Game preview. The camera preview to be big. How do I? Not as a panel. Oh, that's interesting. Not what I want. Okay. I'm just going to press play so that you can see out of the camera. Oh, it's disabled. That's I didn't have to press play, I don't think. I just had to enable it. Okay. So, the reason you want to zoom in when you take your image when possible, like take it from far back, is because the more field of view you have, the more distorted the edges are towards the corners of the screen. So what you can do is if you zoom in a lot, like let's say we'll do like 15 FOV here, and then we'll move the camera back really far. We'll do it like an angle too, so you get like a nice crisp view. When you zoom in, you get these nice clean lines and you get a much better sense of like how everything looks. So what I recommend is you get that scene making tools mod, you get a camera and you zoom it in nice and far, and you take pictures by pausing the game and then doing Windows print screen. That's kind of my trick. Or the other option is just take them in Unity. But what you want to do to clean up all this stuff is you just turn off gizmos and you turn off the grid. You know, maybe you keep some of this other stuff out of the scene, but it's kind of what you see is what you get, right? If you have a camera, you can turn volumetrics back on, take a picture with the volumetrics, and then all you have to do just make this fairly big, and all I do is just Windows Shift S. I just use snipping tool, and I make my thumbnail that way. That's what I do for a lot of stuff. But yeah, handy little trick that is. I guess the other thing that I'd recommend too is come up with like a reproducible style for your thumbnails. So for instance, let's go. Got something I can open up here. I've got a whole bunch of like branding for my channel, right? And I've got a thumbnail template that I made. I'm gonna open it up here. Yeah. So I've got a thumbnail template where it's all split up into layers where I just paste an image onto the background and I make it fit. I've got like a little border on top of everything. I make it so that the watermark is always the same place and size. I've got a kind of guide for where I put the game logos. And then I've got my font where the size and I've got my text where the font and size are already set, so I could just type whatever I want. And then I just export that. So if you're good with like Photoshop, GIMP, any image editing software, I recommend you do something like that where you like save a project that has layers in it. And then when people see your mods in mod.io, those slight differences on the edges will stand out and they'll be like, oh, that's so-and-so's mod. It'll catch their attention and kind of give them an idea of who made it without having to even look. So that's one other tip that I would give. Oh yeah, and of course too, like you can switch from perspective to like orthograph or to isometric. This kind of flat view. I think that's maybe too flat for thumbnail images, but you can do that. And then of course, this little post-processing toggle here, that will also turn on and off, you can see it here. It'll turn on and off the screen space reflections on stuff too. So make sure you keep that on. Anyways, I think unless anyone has any more questions, that should be it. Alrighty. Well, I'd like to thank you all for stopping by. Either you hopped on earlier, or either you're still on, or either hop on later and check it out. Thanks for taking your time to check out my tutorial. And yeah, keep an eye out because I will make a shorter form version of it, and I'll try and add some timestamps to this stream because I know it's what, almost 5 hours now. It's a lot. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys around. Later.